to order. Welcome to meeting number 45 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Finance. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the committee's motion adopted on Tuesday, April 27th, the committee is meeting to study the subject matter of Bill C-30, an act to implement certain provisions of the budget tabled in Parliament on April 19th, 2021, and other measures. Today's meeting is taking place in the hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of January 25th. We would, so you will, on your screen, you will see all the people, but the system only shows the person that is speaking. That's the system we're operating under. So with that, we'll go immediately to witnesses. I want to thank everyone for coming. Some I know on short notice as we're trying to pile a lot of witnesses in this week. I would ask if you could keep your remarks to about 5 minutes, and that'll give us more times for rounds of questioning. So with that, we will start with the Association of Daycare Operators of Ontario. Ms. Hannon, Executive Director. Andrea, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning to everybody. Thanks for inviting the Association of Daycare Operators of Ontario to make a presentation to the committee. We appreciate the work that you're doing to study this bill. ADCO was founded in 1981 and is the industry association for Ontario's independent licensed childcare centres, both commercial and not-for-profit. Roughly a third of the Ontario families who use licensed childcare rely on the services of an independent licensed childcare centre. Typically, these are small businesses owned and operated by women. Many of them are also registered early childhood educators. ADCO envisions a thriving and diverse independent licensed childcare sector. We provide our members with a forum to work together to continually enhance childcare quality, affordability, and choice for parents. Our goal is to help every family find the right childcare fit, both for their child's unique temperament and also for the family's lifestyle, beliefs, budget, and work arrangements. This goal is most achievable when governments prioritize parental choice. Parental choice has 4 key elements. 1, a diversity of providers, including commercial, not-for-profit, and public programs. 2, a diversity of settings, including center-based, home-based, and workplace-based care. 3, a diversity of hours, including full-time, part-time, occasional, and 24/7 care. And 4, a diversity of teaching methods so parents can choose the kinds of learning experiences they want their children to have. Previous government efforts to introduce childcare programs have not prioritized parental choice. Instead, they funded large public sector institutions versus smaller private and not-for-profit childcare centers. Ontario families have seen this firsthand. In 2010, when the province launched its full-day kindergarten program, forcing the closure of some 1,200 independent licensed childcare centers, both commercial and not-for-profit. Not only were the kindergarten spaces in these centers lost, so were all of the spaces they provided for preschoolers, toddlers, and infants. Since then, licensed childcare has been far more expensive and far more difficult for parents to find. ADCO is concerned that the proposed federal childcare plan could have a similar impact across the country. If it follows a similar path, replacing existing childcare infrastructure with new public sector institutions, it's predictable that similar challenges will occur. These challenges may even be more pronounced because of the diversity of systems we see from province to province. Other organizations across the country share these concerns. Among them are the Canadian Council of Montessori Administrators, the Alberta Association of Childcare Operators, and the Childcare Professionals of BC. Canada's childcare sector is already fragile because of last year's extended pandemic closures. Taking a national one-size-fits-all approach is risky. It could close thousands of woman-owned small businesses, destabilize existing provincial childcare systems, and cause chaos for families. This would leave taxpayers having to pay not just to create any new licensed spaces, but also to replace all of the spaces that are lost. Support for all licensed childcare centers, regardless of their corporate structure or ownership, is hugely important in mitigating this risk. The most efficient way to do this is to fund families directly so parents can make the childcare choices that work best for them. This is not only the fastest way to help families who are grappling with childcare issues right now, it helps ensure they'll have access to the broadest range of childcare choices for years to come. In closing, ADCO offers the committee the following recommendations. 1, prioritize parental choice by funding families directly through measures such as the Canada Child Benefit Program. 2, respect provincial diversity. Don't make funding contingent on changes in the provincial program, and don't discriminate against small entrepreneurs that run childcare centers. And 3, support all childcare spaces equally, regardless of whether they're in publicly owned, privately owned, or not-for-profit centers. ADCO looks forward to working with you to help all families find the right childcare fit, however they define it. Again, it's about trusting parents and empowering families for the greater good of children and generations to come. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Andrea. We'll turn then to Toby Sanger, Executive Director, Canadians for Tax Fairness. Not a new witness here. Go ahead, Mr. Sanger.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning, members. There are a lot of positive measures in Bill C-30, and I'd like to commend the government for introducing them. These include the $15 an hour minimum wage, extension of COVID and EI benefits, funding for childcare, funding for infrastructure, for healthcare, and much more. We're glad the federal government will finally apply the GST starting July 1st to imports of digital services, short-term rentals through digital platforms, and goods supplied through fulfillment warehouses like Amazon. This is long overdue, but still appreciated, and one step towards leveling the digital playing field. For far too long, Canada has given foreign digital giants, some of the largest companies in the world, generous tax preferences at the expense of Canadian companies and producers. This has contributed to hundreds of business closures, thousands of jobs lost, and billions in revenues foregone. Since the pandemic, it has only got worse as sales by companies like Amazon have exploded, while Main Street businesses across Canada have suffered enormously. The government should also eliminate the tax deduction for advertising on foreign internet platforms. This has contributed to billions in advertising flowing to Google and Facebook and lost to Canadian media outlets. We're glad to see the government commit to introduce a digital services tax on the revenues of foreign e-commerce giants starting next year. But the proposed tax will only apply to a small number of companies in specific sectors. Because the digital economy can't be ring-fenced, the Canadian government must also support fundamental international corporate tax reforms at the OECD negotiations now taking place, including support for a global minimum corporate tax at 21% or higher, as US President Joe Biden has proposed, treating multinational enterprises as unitary enterprises for tax purposes, and allocating the profit of multinational enterprises between countries using real economic factors, just as we do between provinces in Canada. We're glad the government has also finally taken some action on restricting a number of corporate tax loopholes and the stock option deduction loophole. However, we believe the stock option deduction loophole should be completely closed instead of just partially closed. This government should also take inspiration from US President Joe Biden, who is planning to eliminate lower tax rates on capital gains for the wealthiest. It's unconscionable that the wealthiest in society pay a lower tax rate on their investment income than ordinary working people pay on their employment income. This is something that wealthy investors such as Warren Buffett, Bill Gross, and Bill Gates agree with eliminating. Speaking of the wealthy, inequalities of wealth have only got worse during the pandemic, with Canada's billionaires increasing their fortunes by about 80 billion over the past year. A mildly progressive wealth tax on fortunes of over 10 million could raise about 20 billion a year. I'm glad that this government is committed to identify ways to tax extreme wealth in its throne speech, but disappointed that there was nothing about it in the budget. A large majority of Canadians, including Conservative supporters, support having a wealth tax. Even the IMF and OECD both recently called for countries to introduce and expand inheritance and wealth taxes. So I hope to see them in a number of different election platforms soon. And just as Canada's billionaires have become much wealthier during the pandemic, many large corporations have also made record profits. A study we released yesterday revealed that 50 of Canada's large corporations made record profits last year, with a number also collecting the CEWS wage subsidy and paying low rates of tax. When the CEWS program was first introduced more than a year ago, I was the first to call for much stronger conditions. This would have prevented the type of misuse and wastage of public funds that we've seen with this program. We should now do what we did during the World Wars and what the IMF recently suggested, and introduce an excess profits tax and pandemic surtaxes on those who have profited excessively during the pandemic, and recover some of those public funds. We're glad the government is making carbon incentive payments more visible. That's something that we've advocated for many years. But the federal carbon pricing framework also needs to be significantly strengthened by ensuring that large emitters pay the full carbon price, and applying carbon tariffs and rebates for imports and exports to countries without carbon pricing, so that Canadian industry and jobs aren't adversely affected. We also need to finally eliminate federal fossil fuel subsidies. It's long overdue that we end this climate hypocrisy. Finally, I'd like to commend the Finance Minister for committing to introduce a public registry of the real owners of companies. This will help reduce money laundering, tax evasion, and other criminal activities. The federal government should also increase transparency and accountability in other ways, including by strengthening whistleblower protections and requiring that large multinational corporations publish country-by-country reports of their sales, profits, and taxes paid. Thanks very much, and I look forward to further discussion and questions.
Thank you, Mr. Sanger. Turning then to Maritime Fund Group, Matthew Jelly, President. Welcome, Matt. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to be here today. Together with my three brothers, we own and operate a number of tourism attractions in Prince Edward Island and New Brunswick, amusement parks and water parks. And as you can imagine, COVID-19 has been devastating to our businesses. 90% of our revenue occurs in the June to September period. We are very highly seasonal, very highly focused. This will represent my 32nd year in this business, and this will be by far the most challenging, even more challenging than last year, we expect. Over the years, we have reinvested and expanded our businesses, continuing to grow them and to try to expand them. We've tried to do all the right things by investing in our facilities and becoming more year-round with our seasonal team and our administration team. We went from a business that used to close for 6 months and not even open the mail to one that now has 15 year-round employees in New Brunswick and Prince Edward Island combined. During the peak season in 2019, our Prince Edward Island operations would have 350 employees and New Brunswick would have 200. Unfortunately, in 2020, we lost over 70% of our sales due to both capacity constraints and travel restrictions. Despite that, we were very proud to be able to employ 198 people on Prince Edward Island last summer and 115 in New Brunswick. For many, that is a household's primary income, benefits, and good jobs. For many others, it's a tuition payment, their living expenses, and an income to set them up for the winter. We are proud to be an employer that brings many people into the workforce and helps support them during their early years. Budget 2021 has proposed extending the CEWS and CERS programs while making drastic changes. Not only will they end in September, they will decrease supports to the hardest hit businesses from over 75% in June to only 20% in September. I wish these programs were no longer necessary and we could get back to welcoming thousands of guests every day to our businesses without any thoughts of government assistance. While I share the government goal in getting to the point where this program is no longer needed, now is not that time. By way of illustration, I'll give you the case study of our Shining Waters Family Fun Park. In a normal year, we could expect a $250,000 surplus, which would go to paying down debt and expanding our business. Last year, we lost $300,000. Under Budget 2021, in its most generous interpretation, that loss will widen by $70,000. At our sister company, Sandspit, that loss will widen by a further $160,000 as a result of the decreased percentages in this year's budget. Instead of paying down debt or investing to grow our business, we are borrowing money simply to keep the lights on. It's unreasonable at this point to expect us to go further in debt to fund our operations under the conditions we do. It's simply not an option. And unfortunately, this situation is going to continue until June of next year. We know now what the situation is for our businesses. We know now that this summer is going to be very challenging. Mr. Sanger touched on it, and the media has certainly touched on it, that there has been abuses of the CEWS program. I share the concern about companies accessing the program that do not require it. But the answer is not to eliminate the program, to cut it back. The answer is to strengthen it, to retarget it, and focus it on their objectives. My business is among the tens of thousands that need this program. We cannot allow high-profile abusers of the program to ruin it for those truly impacted, those truly deserving of assistance or public acceptance. The government doesn't have to make predictions about compliance with public health directives or the emergence of additional variants. It does not require the government to predict changes of travel restrictions, border openings, or air capacity. In a world full of uncertainty, the CEWS program provides a rare backstop that our businesses can depend on and make decisions based on. Last week, the Public Health Agency of Canada released a blueprint for summer with one-dose protection that people will still be encouraged to avoid crowded areas, even outdoors. That leaves no doubt about the fate of our businesses for the upcoming season. There's nothing to be gained by waiting longer to make decisions for our business. We need to know now to make decisions on how to prepare. Without any hay in the barn from this season, making it through next winter will be more challenging than this past winter. I have a decision to make. Do I close now and protect what capital I do have, or do I try to open under a very large amount of uncertainty? We have made significant changes to how we manage our attractions, how we manage capacities, and how we ticket things. Unfortunately, there's no pivot for a Ferris wheel or a roller coaster. They are only good for one thing. I can't just go and open longer in this winter whenever tourism and travel recovers. This season ends for me on Labor Day and kids are back in school. The support that CEWS and CERS have offered highly effective business have allowed us to survive until now. Since the onset of the pandemic, we've been able to maintain all of our permanent staff. None of our employees have been asked to take reduced pay or furlough pay under the programs that were allowed. No one missed a paycheck, even in the darkest days of March and April last year. I'm proud of what we were able to manage. I'm grateful for the assistance that we received. We cannot stop now as the finish line is in sight. Look at the criteria, look at how the program is applied. I encourage that, but we cannot wind it back now when things are still so uncertain in our industry. Tourism is going to be in need. It was the first affected. It will be the last to recover. It had the most devastating impact for the most sustained period of time. Even the recovery will not be a magic switch. We have to rebuild customer confidence. We have to restore transportation routes, and we have to rebuild our human resource base at our businesses. Please extend the availability at the existing rates. Please allow us to contribute to the recovery for all Canadians. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Matthew. Turning then to the Ontario Real Estate Association, Mr. Santos, Chair, Government Relations Committee. Mr. Santos, you're on.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members of the committee. My name is Brian Santos, and I'm a broker with Peak Realty in Waterloo Region, about an hour southwest of Toronto. And I'm here as the Chair of the Government Relations Committee for the Ontario Real Estate Association. By way of background, OREA is the trade organization that represents Ontario's 80,000 realtors and Ontario's local 37 real estate boards across the province. We are here today to speak in support of Bill C-30, Budget Implementation Act and the measures that will help remove dirty money out of the real estate market, encouraging more green energy retrofits and connecting more Ontarians with broadband internet. These measures will help hardworking Canadians and our economy bounce back from COVID-19 and set the stage for future economic growth, job creation, and recovery. I'd like to start by outlining our support for specific measures in Bill C-30. Firstly, it aims to get dirty money out of the real estate sector. It commits to creating a national beneficial ownership registry, something that OREA has advocated for quite some time. Money laundering is a multi-billion-dollar problem in our housing market, and it contributes to crowding out hardworking families looking to achieve their dream of one day owning a home. Ontario realtors do not want to see a single dollar of dirty money competing against hardworking young families in our housing market. That is why OREA commends the government and their commitment to create a national beneficial ownership registry. A registry will help make it harder for illicit funds to enter the country through the purchase of real estate by removing the anonymity of perpetrators of money laundering crimes. By giving law enforcement and our government an important tool to keep dirty money out of Canada's housing market, those who are pushing home ownership away from hardworking Canadians will be able to be identified and held accountable. OREA is also pleased to see the government's plans to help make homes more energy efficient through an investment to the Canada Mortgage and Housing Cooperative over the next 5 years. Providing Canadian homeowners with interest-free loans will help them make their homes more energy efficient by completing home retrofits such as insulating their home, installing solar panels, or replacing old windows and doors. OREA wants to ensure that the housing sector is doing its part in reducing our country's GHG emissions. Encouraging green home renovations will not only reduce the housing sector's contribution to these emissions, but also help Canadians lower their energy bills, allowing to put their hard-earned money elsewhere or save for retirement. The proposed program will also encourage clean growth by establishing an industry for energy-efficient retrofits, generating economic spin-off activity, and helping kickstart the economy and creating new jobs. Finally, as many Canadians look to move to more rural and smaller communities, having access to reliable, high-speed internet has become more essential than ever. One of the top questions realtors are asked from their clients when looking for a new home is about the quality of the internet. The commitment to increase broadband investment over 6 years to the Universal Broadband Fund will support a more rapid rollout of broadband projects in collaboration with the work currently being done in provinces and territories to ensure that every corner of the country is connected. The investment will help Canada reach its goal of having 98% of the country connected to reliable internet service by 2026. Investing in broadband across the country will help address the infrastructure and competitive gap in our smaller communities. This new investment will ensure that more Canadians will be able to work remotely, creating jobs and reversing out-migration in more rural communities in Canada. In a modern economy where remote work is increasingly more common, especially now with the onset of the pandemic, Canada cannot compete globally if its people and businesses can't access good internet service. I would also like to take this opportunity to highlight other measures within Bill C-30 that OREA was pleased to see included. The proposed GST new housing rebate will allow home buyers to recover 36% of the GST paid on the purchase of a new home, priced up to $350,000, for a maximum rebate of $6,300. Applying this rebate to lower and middle income Canadians will make home ownership more accessible and affordable for more Canadians. Additionally, with the pandemic creating a decrease in demand for retail and office space, expanding the rental construction financing initiative will support the conversion of vacant commercial property into new housing. This funding will assist in the development and conversion of commercial property space across Canada into hundreds of units of rental housing. Lastly, the support of public transit projects across Canada will bring forward new subway lines, LRTs, electric buses, and active transportation infrastructure and improved rural transit. The proposed new permanent funding will provide communities with the opportunity to plan for new transportation projects, which will encourage the creation of greater housing supply and making more desirable places to call home. As Canada continues to look to get our economy back on track, Ontario realtors believe that housing has the potential to lead the recovery. OREA is pleased to see that Bill C-30 proposes support for the housing sector in a number of ways to help the government's efforts in putting Canada on the path to recovery. Thank you, Chair and members of your committee, for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions should there be any.
Thank you very much, Mr. Santos. Turning then to Réseau FADU, Ms. Tassie Goodman, President and Provincial Secretariat.
Monsieur le Président, je vous remercie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, parliamentarians. My name is Gisèle Tassie Goodman, President of Réseau FADOC, and I have with me a colleague. I would first like to thank the members of the committee for this invitation. We are a group of people aged 50 and over with over 550,000 members. In each of our political representations, we wish to contribute to the improvement of the quality of life for seniors. In recent years, the federal government has taken some positive steps towards seniors. It was essential to maintain the age of eligibility for old age security and the guaranteed income supplement at 65. Automatic enrollment in the guaranteed income supplement for those eligible for this program was necessary. The increase in the amounts granted through the guaranteed income supplement was also welcome, just as the increase in the earnings exemption of the guaranteed income supplement is appreciated by many experienced low-income workers. These are moves that our organization has welcomed. However, what concerns us today is the federal government's choice to increase the old age security pension by 10% only for those aged 75 and over. While the Prime Minister is consistent with his 2019 commitment, thousands of seniors between the ages of 65 and 74 have been hit hard by the measures announced in the last federal budget. Our organization recommends that the 10% increase in old age security be extended to all persons eligible for this benefit in order to avoid creating two classes of seniors. For the FADOC network, it is clear that financial insecurity has no age limit. Many people aged 65 have as much difficulty making ends meet as those aged 75. As of today, an individual receiving only old age security pension and the maximum amount from the guaranteed income supplement will have an annual income of $18,505. A person in this situation has an annual income below the official poverty line in Canada. As part of the Poverty Reduction Act passed in 2019, the Canadian government chose to use the market basket measure as the official poverty line in Canada. For 2021, the market basket measure thresholds range from $19,564 to $21,132 for a single person, depending on where the individual lives. It is unacceptable that a person receiving only the old age security pension and the guaranteed income supplement does not meet these thresholds. The purpose of the market basket measure is to establish the cost of a minimum subsistence basket of goods and services that meets basic needs. Individuals with incomes at these thresholds do not live, they survive. Moreover, some items that are essential to household well-being are not included in the calculation of the market basket measure. This is the case for some non-reimbursed health care, such as dental care, eye care, and the purchase of medication. It should be remembered that aging people have current expenses that can be higher than those of other age groups, including the purchase of medication and equipment. For Réseau FADOC, it is obvious that the sums granted through the old age security and the guaranteed income supplement must be at least able to cover the basic needs included in the market basket measure. As a starting point, the federal government must commit to increasing old age security benefits by 10% for all seniors eligible for this program starting at age 65. The proposed increase must be made for everyone without discrimination based on age. Réseau FADOC believes that the federal government should also increase the amount of the guaranteed income supplement by $50. By combining these two bonuses, a senior receiving only the old age security pension and the guaranteed income supplement will have an annual income slightly above the lower range of the thresholds set by the market basket measure. This is, in other words, the bare minimum that Quebec and Canadian seniors should expect from their government. I would like to thank the members of the committee for listening to us. We are available to answer your questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Tassé-Gordon. Before I go to the last witness, the lineup for the first round of questions will be Mr. Fast, Ms. Koutrakis, Mr. St. Marie, and Mr. Julian. Turning then to the Tourism Industry Association of Prince Edward Island, Corinne Clements, CEO. Corinne, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and good afternoon to my fellow Islanders, and good morning to those from across the country. Thank you for the opportunity to present to your committee again a mere month after my last presentation. As the CEO for the Tourism Industry Association of Prince Edward Island, this past year has been spent reaching out to operators and identifying the ongoing challenges that our industry has faced since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. With the initial shutdown of our industry back in the spring of 2020, tourism on Prince Edward Island faced that challenge with cautious optimism, opening to Atlantic Canada in July. While the season itself was difficult, many operators would not have survived without the full support of the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. This program provided the assurance operators needed to keep staff working and keep the doors open to the limited visitors we did have. Decisions made last year were done with the optimism and hope that the 2021 season would bring us back to a more normal tourism year with increased capacities, further border restrictions lifted, and the vaccination programs being rolled out across the country. As we are on the brink of kicking off another summer season, operators are now faced with a third wave of the COVID-19 pandemic, enhanced border restrictions, and a beleaguered mindset. In the recent announcement of the 2021 federal budget, the proposed wage subsidy decline would set many operators further behind than last year, and the uncertainties of both subsidy programs and restrictions leaves many facing the impossible decision of remaining closed again and the harsh reality of not surviving the year. Some of our small owner operators are balancing financial struggles, staffing issues, and COVID protocols all at once while navigating through the federal and provincial programs looking for any type of assistance to help them through. The mental health strain is clearly visible, and we will continue to be concerned for these struggling Canadians. As a traditionally seasonal destination, these operators have a 6-month window of opportunity to drive sales, to pay staff, cover debt load, and plan to retain enough revenue to cover 12 months of expenses from the 6 months of business. The Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy and Canada Emergency Rent Subsidy programs provide a backstop for our businesses to keep those staff employed and keep the doors open during these difficult times of reduced capacity and border restrictions. While numbers for visitation and sales remain low, programs such as these have been a lifeline for tourism and hospitality businesses across the country. It is important to note that as visitation and sales increase, these subsidy programs in their current capacity naturally decline and become obsolete. Should operators make the decision to shutter their business for the year, I want to highlight the domino effect that these decisions have on communities, other operators, and our tourism product overall. For example, if a main attraction, as Matthew mentioned earlier, in one of our smaller communities makes the decision to stay closed, this has detrimental implications to local accommodation providers, restaurants, and retail businesses. We need to find ways to ensure these businesses are equipped and able to open to protect the industry in both a rural and urban capacity. Demand drivers like these are the reason for many to make travel plans, and without them, everyone suffers. As we move to reopening to the rest of Canada, our industry is faced with the reality of no meaningful tourism on Prince Edward Island until the 2022 year. Even if they survive the 2021 season, without the ability to generate meaningful cash flow, they are looking at a long winter to prepare for what is hopefully an improved 2022. The industry will not see the 2019 levels of visitation and expenditure that we enjoyed only a couple of years ago, but signify the start of a struggle back to the thriving industry we once were. With that, our focus is on ensuring the survival of our operators and recognizing the importance of not only surviving, but finding a way to see capital infrastructure investments and upkeep so that these businesses are well positioned to welcome back visitors to our island. We are not out of this pandemic yet, and our tourism and hospitality industry faces its biggest challenge to date, surviving a second year of pandemic lockdowns and limited ability to operate. We are asking the Government of Canada to maintain the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy Program and Canada Emergency Rent Subsidy at their current rates until the time comes for people to travel and restrictions are eased. Our industry is focused on people, interacting, traveling, and coming together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Clements. We'll turn then to the first round of questions. Mr. Fast, followed by Ms. Kotrakis. 6 minutes. Ed?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Fast has yielded to me, so I'll be taking his spot.
Mr. Cumming, go ahead. You're on.
Great. Good to see you again, Chair, and thank you for all the witnesses today. I want to start off with Mr. Jelly. And Mr. Jelly, I have enormous empathy and respect for you as an entrepreneur and the crisis that you're working through with those losses through your what has been a very active business. So I wanted to talk to you about a couple of things. Is it not time that we looked at these supports on a more of a risk analysis and a targeting? Because obviously the government can't carry on these levels of support across the board. It's just not sustainable. Would you not agree that we should now do a better risk analysis and actual targeted supports?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Cumming, for your question. I participated in a Chamber of Commerce video here 5 years ago promoting entrepreneurship, where I said it's not realistic for us all to work for the government. Didn't realize 5 years later that may come back to hit me. I do agree. I highlighted in my comments that I think it is an opportunity to retarget and refocus. But what I am saying is that in tourism and hospitality, if we're looking to retarget, we are there. If we're talking about businesses down by more than 50%, more than 70%, those are the places that I feel we should be. As far as public companies and private equity funds, and very, very large companies, I think there's lots of policy considerations for you and your committee members, and it is not my place to do that. But I know for us, for small businesses, for those most highly affected through no fault of their own, through those that the pandemic, both from the double whammy of travel restrictions and capacity limits, our businesses have been so devastatingly hit. Certainly, and all biases declared, I think we're in that category that is well deserving. Is a business that's down 11%, is it time to start weaning those off? Certainly, I think that's a very fair consideration, but I'm more than happy to share my financial situation and how it's impacted us. A water park that's designed and does hold 3,000 to 4,000 people a day, limited to less than 500, and what that means. Expenses don't change. We still need to have lifeguards. You still need to have the water flowing on the water slides, and you still need to pay the insurance company.
Right. Well, thank you for that. And without question, I know that you would just like to be back in business and not on the support wagon. And unfortunately, we haven't seen the volume of vaccines that looks like that's going to happen. Hopefully, maybe it'll partially happen this summer, but so far, I don't think we see indication of that. Have you looked at other jurisdictions about some of the efforts that they've taken for guidance with opening larger scale businesses related to rapid testing or with tracing and some of the activities that they've gone into? I know in the UK to open up that they put some standards in place. Is that something that you see will be important to your industry?
Certainly, I mean, our most obvious comparison in the amusement industry, and probably the largest component of it, is next door in the United States, where there's been a whole different approach to COVID-19 and how it's been managed. Some of those parks, remained open through most of this. Many in the last couple weeks have ramped up to full capacity, removal of mask mandates, and it's not really sure how all that's going to work out. Locally, we have to work with our Chief Public Health Office, and in Prince Edward Island, we have benefited for the most part from a public health point of view, but we have an extremely conservative and careful approach. And rapid testing and that being administered in businesses and that has not been part of their current arsenal. It's something that we would certainly look at, and we have been doing a jurisdictional scan. But ultimately, if travel restrictions and capacity limits aren't going to be lifted in the next 30, 40, 50, this season is gone. And so a recovery in August, I can't just open an amusement park full speed on August 1st and run it for 30 days. It takes time to get there, and there has to be procedures in place. So we are looking, and we would certainly welcome, any different approach that we could. Less so looking at Europe, more so currently at the United States.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jelly. Ms. Hannan, you caught my ear with your presentation, and thank you for being here today. So it sounds like, if I was to frame it, that your belief is that for childcare, the choice is not with levels of government, but it should be with parents and individuals.
Yes, that's absolutely right. I think that's the number one consideration, is we have to preserve parental choice.
And do you think in preserving that parental choice, by having those funds go directly to parents to make that choice, will that create the spaces need, or will the market take care of itself by making sure that there's adequate funding to try and reduce the cost?
Yeah, I believe so. Certainly what we've seen when there's government intervention and picking winners and losers in terms of what parts of the sector they want to expand to create spaces, it invariably results in fewer spaces overall. So if you fund families, and families want licensed childcare owner-operators and not-for-profits that provide licensed childcare, they are very quick to respond to community needs. And so they create the number of spaces that are needed, and they tend to create them exactly where they're needed.
So do you think there's
question, James?
Do you think there's a jurisdiction, whether it be within the provinces or within Canada or elsewhere, that is really designed a program that works very effectively that you would suggest that we should model after?
I think that all provinces have some strengths and some weaknesses. I think the big weakness that we see, and it depends a lot of times on which government is in power at the provincial level. I think the big weakness we see is when any government tries to pick winners and losers. So they try and direct expansion only in the public sector. Well, then you invariably lose centers in the independent license sector, whether that's commercial or not-for-profit. You try to expand the not-for-profit sector by favoring that sector with subsidies or with grants, things like that. Then invariably you see closures in the commercial sector. So it's very important just not to pick winners and losers. And I think really just from a basic common sense level, parents are always going to pick the licensed childcare providers that they feel are best for their children, and make other kinds of childcare arrangements if that's required as well. We have to trust parents. Parents know better than governments how to raise children.
Okay, well, I do move on to Ms. followed by Mr. St. Marie. Ms. Kotrakis.
Merci,
Annie?
Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much. I would like to welcome and thank all of our witnesses who came this morning. My first question is for Madame Tassé Goodman. Hello, and welcome to the committee. The 2021 budget is proposing an initiative that would support community organizations that help elders, low-income elders, and the most vulnerable to stay home in their homes as much as possible. And so there would be a work that would be able to be done to be able to help them so that they would be able to stay in their homes and that they would have access to transportation. We know that the population, the elderly population is increasing, and that will mean pressure on our healthcare system as well as for all types of institutions in a near future. So how do you think it's important to increase the capacity of the elderly to be able to live at home longer for based on such initiatives? And well, thank you for your question. Well, I would say that with the announcements in the budget, and we do know this, the majority of the elderly do choose and they want to stay in their homes under their own roofs, in their neighborhoods, near their families and near their circle of friends. So this is something that gives them a sense of well-being. And so we know that there is a 10% increase for those that are 75 and more. We think that this may be creating two classes of elderly. So if giving a 10% increase to all the elderly people who are receiving old age security, this would help people who are in need. So we believe that since there are a lot of concerns and fears amongst the elderly at this point who say that they're having a hard time making ends meet right now, what we're asking the federal government is to readjust their proposals and to offer this increase of 10% to all people over 65 years. Question. Madame Matase-Goodman, on the other side of the coin, have you received comments with respect to the elderly who are 75 years and older? How do they feel with respect to this increase and if it will help them? Well, this increase, well, of course, it will help them, and we can't be against that increase. You can see that those who are 65 and over, a lot are women who are taking care of their elderly parents, their caregivers, and they are at risk themselves, because they are having to help out their elderly parents with taking them to appointments, doctor's appointments at the hospital. They need to pay parking. Those are extra expensive. So you can see that these caregivers who are older already in the elderly category are helping their even more elder parents. And so when their older people are not able to move around as quickly, but they do have the help of their children, and we think that it would be a good idea to be able to offer this increase to all elders and all people who are 65 and older who are getting the old age security.
Sanger. With regards to the $304 million announced investments in the CRA, your organization compares the revenue projections of the federal government to the estimates presented by the PBO. While the federal government predicts revenues of $810 million over 5 years, the PBO's analysis could suggest that revenues could be much higher, with the federal government receiving $5 for every dollar it invests in the CRA on tax compliance. What are your thoughts on the discrepancy between the federal government's revenue estimates and those suggested by PBO Analytics? And from your perspective, what revenues will be generated from this $304 million investment?
Well, it's hard to actually predict how much will be generated. The PBO estimates were for increased resources, particularly in terms of the business programs, and they show a strong rate of return: $5 for every dollar invested. Estimates from the United States show approximately a 10-to-1 return. It's hard to exactly predict on this, but I think that each of these estimates show that there is a really strong return from reinvesting in the CRA and enforcement and auditing. But it also needs to be combined with some political will to actually to go after the tax dodgers, as well as stronger legislation in different ways. So the CRA has taken some of the larger corporations to court, but in some cases they haven't won, and we need a stronger legislation in that way as well. As well as the political will at the CRA, at the senior levels of the CRA, to actually pursue some of these cases as well, and to prosecute them too. I mean, frankly, I don't like to call for more money for lawyers, but we need a stronger prosecution in a lot of ways, because people can often be outgunned in court.
Okay, sorry, Annie, we'll have to move on. Mr. St. Marie, followed by Mr. Julian. Gabriel?
Oui, merci, Wayne. Alors, bonjour.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for your presentations. This is really an interesting panel. So, Madame Tassé-Goodman and Mr. Poirier-Monette, I would like to say hello also. Madame Tassé-Goodman, you're very clear with your presentation. You don't want there to be two classes of elderly. You reminded us that there were a lot of concerns among the elderly that are 65 and over. Something that really struck me in your presentation was that even when you account the announced increase, not for this summer, but for over a year now, for those 75 and older, for the old age security, it's still not sufficient to be able to ensure that that the elderly will be able to be be above the lowest threshold of revenue. Is that right? Well, yes, that is true. Yes, and question, that is why you're suggesting an increase of $50 a month for the guaranteed income supplement, and that would be to ensure that there would be a survival income, really. And you said that in 2019 there was legislation that was enacted, the Poverty Reduction Act. Do you feel that there is a connection between this Poverty Reduction Act and the present bill? I will let Philippe Poirier-Monette answer that. Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the question. Of course, when we're establishing a poverty threshold, we would expect that the government benefits for the low-income people would at least be at the minimum of that threshold for the poverty line. And so that's what we would hope, that they would be able to have this increase. And even with that increase, there would be an interest to having even more, and that would be for the guaranteed income supplement, that we would like to see an increase also. What we're saying also with respect to the market basket measure, some elements, costs are excluded from that, whether it's dental care, whether it's the purchase of medication, and other costs that really should be able to be considered, and they're not taken into consideration right now. Thank you. I'd just like to let you know that your camera is just went off. And this reminds me, when I have discussions with the elderly, they say that for people that have difficulties with their hearing, the Quebec government will give them a hearing aid, but just for one ear, and there would need to be an increase for that also. And as Madame Tassé-Goodman would say, that would be important. With respect to at Radio-Canada, there was a commentary, and they were referring about a study that looked at 50 countries, and they said that Canada was one of the first countries with respect to replacement statistics, and that is the amount of money we have when we're working as opposed to the retirement. It drops by almost 50%. It's not even at 51%, and that is compared with the OECD, which is several points above that, and for the European Union, and where it sits at 63%. retirement revenue is 63% of working revenue. So for the 65 and older, I think it would be important that they would be able to at least come closer to the OECD country standards. So do you believe that this is something that you have analyzed and you would like to make a comment on? Thank you. Philippe, would you like to answer? Yes, I'd very be pleased to do that. I'm sorry my camera is not working. I'm very sorry for that. We have tabled a brief with the committee on this subject, and there is an element with it we do look at with respect to the replacement revenue levels in Canada with respect to other OECD countries. And of course, we're not the worst, but we're certainly not the best either. And so we were looking at the analysis and a report on that subject that was saying that over the years, the old age security in terms of the replacement rate, it will be reducing over time. And for the CPP, we follow salaries, and so that will increase given the average. So we see that salaries are follow that increase every year. And so that is an important to note, because we can see that for old age security, it's replacing revenue, but it doesn't vary from one in person to another. So it is given in the same proportions to everyone. So we think that there should be an increase in terms of the method for indexing, so that we could avoid and that we don't see the impact being stronger.
Peter, followed by Mr. Falk and Jansen on a split. Peter?
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Thanks to all of our witnesses for being here today, and we hope that you and your families continue to be safe and healthy as this third wave crashes on our shore. And thank you for your important testimony around the many concerns that Canadians have around the lack of a budget addressing real needs in so many ways. I'd like to start by asking Mr. Sanger a question. Mr. Sanger, you've been very eloquent about in previous crises like the world wars, we had strict laws against profiteering and strict laws to ensure that we were all in this together. And you point out that Canadian billionaires have reaped over $80 billion during this pandemic. There's no wealth tax. Canadian corporations are at record profit levels. There's no tax on excess profits. And at the same time, we see in this budget bill a slashing of COVID benefits while the third wave is crashing on our shores. Students being forced to pay their student loans. Seniors, 60% of them excluded from even a modest top-up would bring them closer to the poverty line. People with disabilities get no supports at all. There's been an increase in homelessness, 10 million Canadians who can't pay for their medication, and the government says we can't afford pharmacare. I guess my question to you is simply this. Is there a cost that we pay as a society? And do Canadians pay a cost with the fact that we have such an inequitable tax system, and banks and billionaires are able to reap the profits and profiteer during a pandemic, while so many Canadians struggle?
Sorry. Absolutely, there's a cost. We came out with a tax fairness recovery plan before the budget, which outlined a number of ways that the federal government could generate over $70 billion in additional revenues. They could then be used for both for the paying for the pandemic, for helping to fund the recovery, and introduce new programs such as those. I do want to say that after hearing to the testimony of others that I really do want to commend parliamentarians and the government for bringing in really important programs. I mean, I do think that Canada's programs were some of the best in the world, but I do get concerned when some of them are not that well targeted, and then that undermines undermines confidence in government programs. Not only does it cost more, but it undermines confidence in government programs in that way. And so the method of moving forward in terms of things like the CEWS program, it can be problematic in that way. It'd be better if it's targeted at those who really need it, and that funds then don't go to things like hedge funds or highly profitable businesses, as we've outlined in that way. But then there are also ways that the government could recover some of those funds in different ways, such as through an excess profits tax or through other things. I mean, we have seen really increasing inequality during this pandemic, and I think people are really compassionate and understanding about that. About what's happened, and we do need to move forward. And there are a lot of ways that the government, we've got very high deficits. We're going to have to pay for these. There's a lot of ways that governments can move forward by taxing the highly profitable corporations and the wealthy who've done not only very well over the past decade, but very well over the pandemic as well.
Thank you for that. And I flagged the government announcement just a few days ago as well, that they they don't have the money or the resources to ensure that Indigenous communities actually have safe drinking water, dozens of communities that have poisonous water. And the government continues to pretend that they just don't have the resources to handle these issues. I think you pointed out an important point in terms of the use of the wage subsidy. We've had companies that have used that for dividends, for stock buybacks, for big executive bonuses. And the government is saying that it is dealing with overseas tax havens. I'd like to come back to that, which the PBO estimates costs us over $25 billion every year. And CRA officials told this committee just a few months ago that they don't have the legislative framework to even tackle the widespread tax evasion that we're seeing through the use of overseas tax havens. What could the government be doing to actually tackle in a serious way what is a chronic blight on Canada, $25 billion a year going to overseas tax havens, rather than being used to meet the needs of people in our country?
That's why I went into a bit more detail in my statements there. There are some really important negotiations taking place through the OECD and G20 this year over fundamental reform of the international corporate tax rules, and the majority of the funds of the revenues lost are at the corporate side, and most of those go to larger corporations and also foreign corporations. And so, if we're talking about increasing competitiveness and the strength of the Canadian economy and businesses, we really need to address this problem. It's not just the revenues lost. And Canada actually has a very good system of allocating taxable income between provinces according to real economic factors. And if we implemented some of those rules, they're under discussion at the federal level, at the international level. And if Canada was a champion for that, then we could largely do away with the problem of losses through tax havens and international tax dodging in different ways. So sorry.
We are going to end it there, Mr. Sanger. We will now go to a 5-minute round, and Mr. Falk and Ms. Jansen are going to split this first period, and then Ms. Zerowitz. Ted?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And actually, Ms. Jansen's going to take the next round, so I'll take the full 5 minutes if that's okay with you.
Not a problem.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, thank you to all the witnesses this morning. Your testimony has been very interesting in providing this committee and study with some very valuable information. Ms. Hannon, in your comments previously, you indicated about the choice for parents and how important it is that we leave Canadian parents with choice. In your press release following the government's announcement of a Canada-wide early learning and childcare system, you said that this approach could see many families winding up with fewer childcare choices. So I'm wondering, could you explain how a one-size-fits-all approach would actually limit parents' choice? And what would you recommend instead of that?
Okay, well, first of all, we've seen parental choice limited in Ontario through the full-day kindergarten program. So we have some experience with this in that prior to the introduction of full day kindergarten, a lot of the full day kindergarten program in the schools, a lot of full day kindergarten programming was provided by independent licensed childcare centers. When the government rolled out its full day kindergarten program, it said, okay, well, full day kindergarten, it's going to be free. Well, except for it wasn't. And it also wasn't the same as what the program was when it was in independent licensed childcare centers. When it was in independent licensed childcare centers, it was fully regulated under the Day Nurseries Act at that time. It's now the Child Care and Early Years Act. So it went from being a very, very regulated type of environment with very strict quality standards to being a much, much more basic kind of a program. It also wasn't free. The little bit of care that you need at the beginning of the day and the end of the day, what we call wraparound care, so it mirrors parents' work hours, suddenly parents had to pay for that. So it meant that the public sector system was then, the public sector system or its preferred contractors operating in schools were then charging parents sometimes as much for the little bit of wraparound care at the beginning and end of the day as parents were paying previously at independent license centers.
You know,
sorry.
You know, on that same line about independent license centers, I note in your press release that you also said that many of these small businesses are owned and operated by women, and that if the government actually proceeds with its nationalized daycare plan, that there's going to be a risk to many of these female-owned businesses. And so what would you say about that? Or do you actually anticipate that they'd be able to keep their doors open and be competitive?
No, I think that depending on the approach that the federal government took, I think a lot of those small businesses would close. And I guess what is really sort of disturbing from parents' standpoint, in that not only would their existing childcare arrangements be disrupted, is those options will be gone forever. You know, those centers aren't going to reopen, and it's not like you can just substitute a new public system for the existing system that exists in a lot of provinces. You know, independent licensed childcare centers may find that they can't stay open as a national public sector oriented system is rolling out. So you could conceivably have small independent licensed centers closing all over the place 2 and 3 years before these new public centers are even built.
The other point I'd like you to weigh in on, I think I'm just about out of time.
Yep.
But the government is prescribing how parents should raise their children with this program. And there's going to be many parents that make the choice and the sacrifice to have one parent stay home and raise the children at home, because they want to make sure that they pass on the values and ideology that's important to them. And can you talk about how this system that they're proposing could be better if they would give parents the choice, and how it's actually discriminatory to people that and parents that choose to raise their children with one parent staying at home?
Fairly quickly, if you could, Andrea.
Yeah, you know, absolutely. I think it's really important that parents be in the driver's seat when it comes to childcare choices. And not every parent is going to need a full-time licensed childcare space that runs during the regular workday, 9 to 5 or 8:30 to 4:30 work day during the week. Lots of parents have more flexible employment than that. Sometimes one parent is at home part of the time. And you know what? We shouldn't have systems that require families to mold to the system. The system should evolve to allow families to be in the driver's seat.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I believe Ms. Zerowitz is turning her time over to Mr. Fraser. Mr. Fraser, you're on. 5 minutes.
Certainly. Look, let me begin with Mr. Jelly. First of all, as an Atlantic Canadian who's just across the Northumberland Strait from you, I can tell you that my family very much enjoys our summer visits to the island, and make it an annual habit of popping over to Shining Waters. And I was there last year actually with our family, and I was very impressed with the measures that you put in place to allow for social distancing, despite the fact that you had for last summer a fairly large number of guests visiting. I never felt once as though in the outdoor environment that you manage that I was being put in harm's way, and I very much appreciate the steps that you put forward. I want to turn to your testimony about the wage subsidy in particular. As I understand it, and believe me, you're not the only tourism operator who's made this point. I think you've broken it down in more explicit detail than others have. As I understand it, the transition away from the wage subsidy as the hiring incentive ramps up might be very appropriate in your view for businesses that perhaps have had a lower hit to their revenue, or perhaps don't have the same operating costs that a business in your position do, or perhaps it can even earn their revenue over the course of an entire year. But what I'm hearing pretty loud and clear from you now is that a business with significant operating costs, with a short season to earn your revenue, and one that's been hit extra hard because of the travel restrictions, this ain't going to work. So can you tell me, in your own words, how can we adapt the program to make sure that we're continuing to support businesses like yours, which I am depending on to help kickstart the recovery, without overspending on businesses who the planned transition away from the full subsidy are actually going to allow them to succeed, while at the same stage prevent you from having to close your doors?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Fraser, for the question. And certainly want to recognize the efforts of my staff in making last season a relative success for us. We couldn't have asked for a better response from them and ultimately from our customers. Look, I think that's a very difficult part of this whole discussion, and I think that's obviously something we have to talk about. And I think for the targeting, if we look at businesses that are down more than 50%, down more than 70%, perhaps it's sector specific. It's things that depend on travel and tourism, and I'm sure there's other highly affected sectors out there. But really trying to zero in on them and zeroing in on businesses that were viable, pre-pandemic as well, to make sure that the reason sales aren't down is that there's been a complete change away from their business model or whatever it might be. I think the hiring credit for many is in a year when we've been navigating so many programs and so many criteria, it's an added level of complexity and a calculation. And if you'll remember in my comments, I spoke about the pride I have in the year-round team we built. We will actually be penalized under the hiring credit because we had wages in March. Some other seasonal operators wouldn't be. If you ran a seasonal restaurant and you had no wages in March, but you have wages in June, July, August, September, that program will work for you. And in fact, it may work better than the wage subsidy. And I'm not sure whether that was the intention or not, but it is a reality that's there. I think for us, it's taking the wage subsidy criteria and formula, those percentages, trying to keep them similar to where they are now. Roughly, if you're down 75% or 70%, you're eligible for 75%. And trying to exclude those companies that have, a much different situation, whether they're publicly traded or something to that effect. And I think really trying to focus on those that are down significantly, and there is a road out and there is a future. How we account for seasonal businesses, that all my revenue happens in 80 days and my expenses are spread over 365, I think that's difficult. And no one program is going to fit every company, and I'm not going to be made completely whole no matter how this program emerges from this committee and from this budget. But we need to keep those rates in place now for the most highly affected businesses, and to give them a chance to make it through this season.
Well, fairly quick question, Sean.
Yeah, sure. And I do have a trip booked for August if the Atlantic bubble comes back, so I'll pay you a visit should you open your doors this summer. Quick question for Ms. Hannon, just a point of clarity. I don't believe anyone internal to the government has ever suggested that our plan is to build a series of federally owned and operated daycares in every community. I take some exception to the characterization of Mr. Falk saying the way he pitched having to, and I quite like Ted as a friend and colleague, but I disagree strongly that that the issue is really ensuring that parents have the choice to stay home. I think it's giving them the choice to do that and giving them the choice to work if they do want to. I'm curious, Ms. Hannon, if the outcome of this program, which is our intention, is to create spaces in communities that may not have them, to make it more affordable for families to access daycare centers that may already exist. Do you not think that giving that choice to a second parent who's currently making the economic decision to stay home because they can't afford childcare if they were going to work, do you not think that that has the potential to give more choice to parents by expanding access either to facilities that exist now by making them cheaper, or by expanding through partnerships with communities and provinces, facilities in communities that don't have daycare today?
I think actually by making childcare more affordable for families, more families will be able to access it, certainly. But it's a question of how do you make childcare more affordable to families? I believe making childcare more affordable to families comes from giving families more money, letting them have more of keep more of the money that they earn in their own pockets, supporting their choices. I don't think that it's very good use of taxpayers' money to start building centers here, there, and everywhere that ultimately will be taxpayer dependent, when in fact, if you just gave the money to families, the private sector and the not-for-profit sector would look after creating the new spaces that are needed.
I know there could be an extended debate on that one, but we have to move on to Mr. St. Marie, who will be followed by Mr. Julian and then Ms. Jensen. Mr. St. Marie, 2.5 minutes.
Oui, merci, monsieur.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Yes, well, this is very interesting debate. If we had more time, we would be able to discuss the family policies in Quebec. All of that's very interesting. So for the FADOC, I would like to have your comments as to why create this question of creating two classes of elderly, 65 to 75 and 75 more. So that idea of waiting to 75 years. And I'd like to have your comments with respect to the $500 single payment for 75 for elders 75 years and older. It gives us an idea that maybe there's elections upcoming. I'd like your comments on that. Thank you very much, Mr. Saint-Marie. Well, it's clear the announcement was made it was consistent. It was the 18th of September 2019. He was looking to tell them about an increase for old age security. And so it was well received by the elders, but why create two classes of elders when we know that there is a great financial distress for people 65 and over? What we think in our network, we think it's important already this year to give the 10% increase for all elders, not just for 75 years and older, for all of them, 65 plus. And so we know that this is a very real problem, and we know that in some places there are women who have stayed at home, who took care of their children, and who were not able to obtain a revenue on the market, on the labor market. And so that means that when it comes to a pension, they don't have one. So notwithstanding that question, those women who are 65 and older are now caregivers for their elderly parents. And once again, this is women who are taking over this responsibility and who lack funding. And there are a lot of people, whether it's women who are widows, who are 60, 65 older, there are many of them, but there is a lack of financing for women and for people that are 65 and over. There's increase in costs. Delivery services during the pandemic that had a considerable impact on the elderly, and the increase in costs for food. And so there have been many calls from those who are 65 and older who don't understand why the government created two classes of the elders with this increase for those 75 years and older. There was an elder who said when they come to the supermarket and they put their hands into their pockets to pay for their shopping, well, they really aren't able to make ends meet and to be able to cover all of the costs for electricity, for medication and other costs. So you can see that there's a problem.
And who will be followed by Ms. Jansen.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Madam Tassi Gutman, I would like you to continue with your explanation, because this is such an irresponsible and unconscionable decision to make, to exclude 60% of the elderly from an increase, which is a minimal increase, which, as you have said, this is for as the elderly are just underneath the poverty line, and 60% of elders are excluded from this measure. It does not make any sense at all. It's crazy. So can you really continue on with your explanations? Would you be able to continue to tell us about the consequences of this irresponsible decision that the government seems to want to go forward with, where people are going to have to find a way to meet ends meet from 65 to 75 when it comes to all of their living costs, without any kind of even a small increase in the old age security? Answer: well, I would tell you that the elderly are very frustrated, and now there are thousands of elders on social media that phone. They really don't understand Mr. Trudeau's government's choices, and the majority stay at home, are living at home in their neighborhood, and they're used to this, their neighborhoods, and they have friends, and they have businesses, they're shopping, they can do it close, and that's what they would like to keep. And however, those who have OAS and GIS, they get $1,500 a month, and so they have a very hard time if they have to go to the dentist for dental care. It's a luxury for them. And for many of us, this is a habit, but for them, it doesn't even come on their list of priorities. And it's the same thing when it comes to having foot care. They have all sorts of difficulties with their feet, and to be able to go and get care, it costs at least $100 per visit. So for the elderly who are on OAS and GIS, they really can't afford that type of expense. And for the purchase of glasses right now for the elderly, their exam is free, but there are extra costs. And sometimes it's fees, and sometimes it's for their extra charges. But when...
And we're going to have to move on to Ms. Jansen, who will be followed by Mr. McLeod. We can move into the next panels a little bit because there's less witness the next panel. So Ms. Jansen, 5 minutes.
Yes, thank you very much. I wanted to first direct my questions towards Ms. Hannan. I was recently talking to a provincial counterpart of mine, and they were saying that universal daycare is not universal anywhere, and that actually it supports more the upwardly mobile and is shown to be harder to access for those most in need. What we found out from a pilot project done here in BC under the NDP, that in the end, with their attempt to get $10 a day daycare, more people are paying less, but there's no new spots. I wonder if you could maybe talk about that.
Yeah, I think that experience actually is echoed in a number of jurisdictions across the country. We did a research study on that a number of years ago, and in areas where there has been the most intervention into the childcare market, so in jurisdictions, provinces that have tried to eliminate anything but a public sector and not-for-profit sector system, that's where access to licensed childcare tends to be lowest, because they just don't create the numbers of licensed spaces that are needed.
Right, and I was talking to a provider here, and he was mentioning that there's a particular chain that has actually, due to this pilot project and the new rules that the NDP has put forward in order to achieve the $10 a day daycare, that there's 18 facilities that chain has now shelved their plans to open. He himself was planning on 2, but now he's rethinking the second one. He's kind of at a point where he can still decide not to do that. And he was just saying, like, there's so many things that are different. Like, there's no one size fits all program. So, for instance, in our area, you need 40 square feet per child, but in other areas, you need 30 square feet per child. It's also like teacher-child ratio, and so this one size fits all program that they seem to want to put forward, it just doesn't work. Like, you will lose many spaces, and as you mentioned, the choice for parents to go with the daycare or the childcare of their choosing.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And, one of the things that we saw when we lost here in Ontario, all of the independent licensed childcare centers, 1,200 of them, during the rollout of the full day kindergarten program, is that originally those licensed childcare centers, and they mostly also provided full day kindergarten, those licensed childcare centers, there were about 20 different recognized, reputable, high quality teaching and learning methodologies used. So this would include things like Montessori, Reggio Emilia, and a few different curriculums like that. And what happened when those centers closed, they're in favor of this full day kindergarten program, is that we lost all of that diversity of programming as well. So there was a sameness and kind of a lowest common denominator approach taken to the whole sector, as opposed to giving parents choices. And that's a really key element of parental choice. You tend not to have parental choice when the focus is on creating these big monolithic institutions to deliver care.
Absolutely. And now I'm going to shift over to Ms. Clements. I know when I heard the Prime Minister talk about a one-dose summer, my heart broke, because I recognized the tourism industry was absolutely hooped with that sort of talking point. I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about the challenges. I know Tourism Industry Association of Canada has been saying over and over that these supports that they've been getting shouldn't stop until the government stops telling people to stay home. I wonder if you could talk about that.
Yes, certainly. Thank you for the opportunity. That's something, I think it's a unique challenge in each of our provinces. Obviously, Atlantic Canada has handled, I think, the COVID restrictions differently than other jurisdictions with our Atlantic bubble last summer. And again, we're looking at an Atlantic bubble. So we were really optimistic with the vaccine rollout that would provide some benchmarks and a roadmap really to return to travel and visitation. And with the vaccine rollouts as they are now in the 1 dose versus 2, and again, the varying restrictions in different jurisdictions, it's very challenging. And that's one of the things that we've had conversations with the Tourism Industry Association of Canada and government is on trying to find ways to clarify those restrictions. I think even as we start to see some jurisdictions open up and ease those border restrictions and increase capacities to be able to move freely and to have consumer confidence and visitor confidence, and have people understand what the restrictions are in each jurisdiction. It's really important.
Yeah. And I think Mr. Jelly mentioned the fact that when you look down south, you can see, we could have been open this summer had we had a timely vaccine rollout, that our procurement had gone well, but we lost, this government lost your summer. Mr. Jelly?
Well, I certainly can't comment on that specifically, but I can say that with what we know now, we do not see meaningful improvement in tourism results over the next few months, and our need and our need for assistance remains. And from my point of view, and as a business owner just trying to welcome people into his business and get back open, I have nothing to gain by trying to apportion blame. I want to find a solution. And the one bit of certainty I have in my business right now is that even if nobody comes, I get assistance with my wages to help support my staff and support my team. And that's what I'm asking to be continued today. And that's where our business is very much focused.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate
Thank you.
that.
Sorry, Ms. Jensen, you're over. Going on to Mr. McLeod. Michael?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And thanks to everybody that made presentations. It's a very interesting discussion. My first question is to the Ontario Real Estate, Brian Santos. I found the presentation very interesting. The comment about encouraging housing repair and energy efficiency as being part of that is something that we're really focused on here in the Northwest Territories. We see it as an easy way to create employment, and a lot of people could use the upgrades on their houses and even build new ones. So I really support that. The one comment that caught my attention, though, was the issue of internet availability. I've sat on a number of studies that took place in the North, because the issue of isolation has a big factor on our youth, and had opportunity to travel around and talk to youth about their mental health and depression, and internet availability was pointed to as an area that was really impacting them, and it also had an impact on distance learning, on education. So it really resulted in a lot of out-migration from our smaller communities to larger centers. So when Mr. Santos, you said that it also has an impact on the housing market, on the decision people make when they want to buy a house. I wanted to ask, how much of a factor is that? How much is a factor in the decision to buy a house in areas with low internet availability? How much, because that really impacts being in the North. We still don't have high-speed internet in some of our communities.
Thank you so much for your time and for the question. I think it's huge. I see it as a practicing realtor. I also sell real estate in Southwestern Ontario, and many of my clients won't consider a property or a home if it doesn't have suitable internet, because that's what connects them both to work and everywhere else. So without good internet, it just doesn't become an option to people. And right now, as people are looking to continue that dream of home ownership, having opportunity to have internet in all places and equitable internet would give people more choice and more opportunity to to buy homes in different places, and not just in the bigger cities. So it is very important. I just especially now, as I have people just trying to find a place that they can afford, having internet is essential and crucial.
And thank you for that. My next question is to the Tourism Association of PEI. I listened with interest on how much the CEWS and CERS have supported your industry, and it's the same in the North. Our backbone of the economy is mining, but tourism was a growing industry, and we had companies and operators popping up every year. We were seeing more and more, and now that a number of them have reduced their operations, it's really hurting the rest of the populations. And the closure of a tourism business really has a spin-off effect in the hospitality sector for sure, but it does in other areas too. My question is to you, because in the North, we've been trying to look at doing things different, and most of the people in the North have had their second vaccine. So there is a number of exemptions are being made for ecotourism for people that are operating in very remote areas. So sport hunters and ecotourism are allowed to bring in people, and it seems to be helping a good percentage of our operators, but it still doesn't help everybody. And the Yukon, for example, has now lifted the restrictions so that anybody coming to the Yukon that has had both their vaccines, they don't have to self-isolate, and they can travel back and forth. And that means a lot more travel within the territories. So if there was the ability for people with both vaccines to travel freely within within our country, within Canada, how much would that help your industry when it comes to enough business to stay afloat?
Yeah, thank you for the question. In terms of Prince Edward Island, to put that into context, in 2019, we would have welcomed approximately 1.6 million visitors. So on an island with a population of just under 160,000 people, you can appreciate the impact that tourism has for us. And while we say 60% of our overall visitation comes from Atlantic Canada, the reality is those are day trips or weekend trips, and they're not bringing in the economic impact that our visitors from Ontario, Quebec, and even the New England states would bring. Those would be our biggest drivers. So, we have a lot of visitors from Ontario and Quebec still booking right now. And I think there's optimism and a desire to travel. We know that's there. If we had the ability to have people moving with the 2 doses of vaccine with no self-isolation requirements, I think that would be a game changer for a lot of our operators this year.
Okay, thank you all. Look, I'll take, I've got one question myself, and Mr. Fast, if you have a single question you want to ask, and Mr. Fragaskatis will go that way. My question really relates to what Mr. Jelly said earlier. He said that we need to strengthen and retarget the wage subsidy. What about timing, Matthew? It can be changed by regulation. It's in the budget bill, I know, but it can be changed by regulation. What about timing? Because I think timing is fairly critical in your industry as we're getting near to June.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Timing is critical. We're 1 month after the budget, and we don't really know much more about the hiring credit. When I'm doing my calculations, I have to take the most favorable view of how it may work. For the wage subsidy and the rent subsidy for businesses like mine that are trying to ramp up, we've committed to opening our business, at least all the maintenance expense and that lead up. We couldn't wait any longer. We had to do that part. But whether we bring on our next wave of staff, we're in a holding pattern right now. And that means every business around us is in a holding pattern. And many are struggling to make decisions right now. And so it's critical that we come out and we even give some guidance, whether it's for smaller, under 1,000 or for privately held or whatever the distinctions are, give some guidance that we're going to make some adjustments to Bill C-30. We're going to make some adjustment to the regulations, and that we're going to be there. Last year, adjustments came midsummer and in the fall, and in some cases after periods had already started. And you know what? Last year, we were all figuring it out. We were opening on a hope and a prayer. But now we have the hard financials from last year. We know without this assistance, there's no feasible way for us to open. And so the sooner we know, the better it is for everybody, the better it is for our employees, the better it is for our communities. And so I would certainly urge that we get to that discussion of how can we strengthen it? How can we keep it intact? Not how can we make it disappear when we're still in a third wave, when we're still below 2-dose vaccinations.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Fast, a single question.
Yes, I'll direct it to Ms. Clements because Mr. Jelly has been doing a lot of the answering. There have been persistent calls for the government to now pivot to targeted sector-specific support for the most heavily impacted sectors of tourism and hospitality. And Mr. Jelly had as much as signaled that in his testimony earlier. Could you tell this committee what targeted sector-specific support for your sector should look like? Obviously, the Enhanced CEWS program is part of that, but are there other elements that you would welcome?
Thank you for the question. I think Matthew has articulated certainly the hardest hit sectors being, the attractions. We see it with our experience providers, accommodation providers. I think, I'm not an expert on what those formulas might look like, but when you start to look at the percentages of the hardest hit, I think that's a true indicator of where we see those deficiencies in the support.
Mr. Fragaskatis, last question, and we'll have to close this panel.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the witnesses. I wanted to ask Mr. Santos, who's in Waterloo. I'm just down the road, Mr. Santos, in London. As you might know, we have seen a very dramatic increase in the average cost of homes here since 2015, and I've told this committee before.
on average, since that time in the city here, there's been a 150% increase in the cost of homes in the past 5.5 years. I think the same phenomenon has been experienced in your community, roughly, Southern Ontario in general terms. What is the position of your organization on what is driving that? And what does this mean for middle income families? I think when we think about the middle class, home ownership is part and parcel of the conception of what a strong middle class family can expect or should be able to expect. But increasingly, I'm finding that middle income families are being priced out of the market.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I appreciate it. You're absolutely right. But what remains undefeated is supply and demand. And supply remains very, very, very low, and demand is a lot higher. There's two reasons for it. One is financial. People have more money in their pockets in the last year by not spending as much on discretionary spending, low interest rates right now, and then the psychological aspect of people spending more time at home and realizing that they need more. I just had a client yesterday closing on a property, and they had to move because they were working from home and they needed more space, and they have kids at home. So it is a big issue right now with the real estate prices increasing so much and very quickly. What our organization believes in is that there's opportunities elsewhere across the province. There's small towns, there's big opportunities. But in order to get there, we need good infrastructure, inclusive of transportation, as well as quality internet. Without that, people have a limited choice. But yeah, we believe that the dream of home ownership is still alive and well, and that's it. And it's just the other factors though as well. Just with construction, new homes, a lot of builders have put their projects on pause in the last year, and that's a limited supply. That's our biggest challenge here is not enough supply in the market, and that's what we're constantly fighting. There's definitely a lot more buyers out there than there are homes available.
Okay, with that, thank you both. And on behalf of the committee, I certainly want to thank all our witnesses for taking your time to make the presentation and answer our questions. We certainly had on quite a number of topics, fairly wide-ranging discussions, so we appreciate with that. So thank you again, and to committee members, we will suspend for 2 minutes and go to the next panel. So meeting suspended. Thank you all. the committee. I think as witnesses know, welcome to meeting numbers 45 of the House Commons Standing Committee on Finance, and we are continuing our pre-study on the subject matter of Bill C-30, an act to implement certain provisions of the budget tabled in Parliament on April 19th. With that, we'll go to presentations from witnesses, and we'll start with Mr. McDonald with the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives. Welcome, David. You've been here before.
Have indeed. So thanks so much for the invitation back to speak to you today about Bill C-30 and Budget 2021. The last time I was at the committee, actually, I presented you with the results of our 2020 childcare fee survey in the context of the fall economic update. I was pleased to see those childcare figures appear in Budget 2021 as the starting point for the government's ambitious national childcare plan. Parents have two main complaints about childcare in Canada. First is that fees are high, and second, that wait lists are long. Targeting the reduction in fees, particularly with quick and substantial reductions by 2022, will have a noticeable impact and make a big difference for parents with young children. However, the expansion of spaces at the same time will be an important corollary to fee reductions to ensure that we don't trade lower fees for longer wait lists. And I look forward to specific targets on space increases as well as reductions in fees. When it comes to building a recovery from COVID-19, affordable and accessible childcare is in a unique position. It certainly supports women as they return to the labor force, being harder hit than men during the pandemic due to job loss, but it also provides improved productivity due to higher female labor force participation, thereby driving long-term real GDP growth. Moreover, it pays higher dividends, tax dividends than other programs do. The reduction in childcare fees so far has been largely driven through provincial expenditures, certainly in Quebec, but also in Manitoba, Prince Edward Island, and Newfoundland, which all have set fee programs, although at a higher rate than Quebec. And the higher income tax that results from higher female labor force participation goes disproportionately to the federal government, despite the provinces being the ones that support it. This makes the federal government an ideal partner on this file, as it is also the main beneficiary of that increased tax revenue. Budget 2021 was relatively limited in its focus on new revenue generation. I'm not overly concerned about deficits, but now is the time to start to consider new measures so that they can be properly implemented in the future. In the short term, I'd encourage the committee to consider CEWS clawback for profitable companies. In the initial months of the rollout of the wage subsidy, the barriers to entry fell quickly. The upside was easy access for businesses that needed it to continue to operate. The downside was that businesses might squeak by on the rules, but that the subsidy in the end would boost profits. While the CRA has aggressively pursued CERB recipients, there's no corresponding effort on the business side. And recent media reporting has highlighted publicly traded companies successfully receiving the CEWS, all while declaring substantial profits. I'd encourage the committee to consider a CEWS payback regime whereby companies that received it but also declared profits pay it back. Given that more support has gone to business than to jobless Canadians during the pandemic, it only makes sense that profitable companies who don't need the wage subsidy send it back to support other recovery efforts. In the longer term, I'd encourage the committee to consider other revenue options. For instance, the federal government could build on its closure of the stock option deduction scheduled for July through an examination, for instance, of capital gains inclusion rate. Given its immense cost, this could provide additional funds for the recovery, as could a more thorough review of tax expenditures, given that many of those tax loopholes go to a very small slice of the upper end of the income spectrum. The proposed digital services tax, 3% of revenue, provides a model for how profit shifting can be tackled for international corporations. The 3% of revenue is a sort of minimum corporate tax for foreign companies, although it could certainly be expanded far beyond digital services, which is its starting point. It is clear from American disclosure that many multinational companies regularly employ profit shifting strategies to declare profits in tax havens instead of in the countries where those profits were generated. Examining a minimum corporate tax, possibly based on the 3% revenue rule, would go a long way to avoiding corporate freeloading on Canadian infrastructure done by foreign multinationals, all while leveling the playing field for Canadian companies that do pay those corporate income taxes. Finally, like the government, I have limited concern about federal deficits and new federal debt. Interest paid on the federal debt has fallen to historic lows when adjusted to GDP. This is true even when one includes the record pandemic deficits and new spending over the next 5 years. Incredibly, we'd have to look to before the First World War to see the federal government paying less to service its debts, adjusted to GDP compared to today. Those low rates make this an ideal time for the federal government to invest in short-term pandemic economic recovery, but also in long-term issues like much-needed changes to avoid the impact of the climate emergency. For members concerned about interest rate increases, it's important to remember that those increases would hit all sectors, not just the federal government. Including the pandemic spending, the federal government's debt to GDP now sits at roughly 50%. Household debt to GDP stands at more than twice that at 112%, and the corporate equivalent is at 130% of GDP. Both of these private portions of the private sector, households and corporate, have jumped 10 points during the pandemic. So even small changes in interest rates, say brought about by Bank of Canada increasing the overnight rate, will have big impacts on the private sector, not only because they are more leveraged, but because they pay a higher interest rate to start with. In that sense, heavy indebtedness of the private sector will protect the federal government from interest rate increases. I thank you for your time and look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. McDonald. Turning then to Grouse Moore Cooperating Association, Colleen Kennedy, Executive Director, coming to us by voice. I believe, Colleen, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair, committee members and fellow panelists. I did have a presentation, a PowerPoint, but I'm going to I'll go by the seat of my pants. So I work for a small not-for-profit that was set up in '93 by Parks Canada and later expanded our mandate to include community. So I'm in a very fortunate region because we have a little of tourism or a lot of tourism and some fisheries. So pre-pandemic, we had a visitation of about 250,000. The total revenue for our region that we generated was $312,500,000. The average spend per visitor was approximately $1,250 a day, and we employ about 1,200 plus in that industry. Our region is made up of 7 enclave communities, Grouse Moore National Park, which we refer to as our other fish plant, a population of around 3,000, and we have our communities engaged in visitor experiences because that's how we build capacity, by using what's around us. Current needs in the tourism marketplace has shifted quickly because of the pandemic, and we've become heavily reliant on technology and connectivity. And I'd like to thank the federal government for their investment over the last year or so in connecting some of these small communities up to allow us to compete. In these investments in technology, our business need this now for sure. We projected in expansion into these markets in 5 to 8 years. Because of the pandemic, we've sort of had to fast forward and catch up quick. So technology has been a big part of our growth and reach out since the pandemic. The rapid response from the federal government was very much appreciated from an employee, an employer, and very much community point of view. The current structure of the wage subsidy will not work for industry nor our region to survive. If we don't have the option to explore and adapt to the new norm, we won't have a chance to grow. The Canadian Emergency Wage Subsidy must continue until the fall of 2022 in order to make the rebuild of this sector feasible. The investment feeds directly into jobs, the economy, and allows our industry to continue its pivot to become one of the world's best destinations for sustainable tourism. And we see this as a way of growing our community. We've lost our accessibility. Our market is very much the domestic market. 70% of our visitors come from Canada, mainly Ontario and Quebec. 30% is our international market, and that's very much dependent on the US and the UK. The accommodations, experiences, and restaurants, just before the pandemic, were just actually getting their feet under themselves and could respond to the capacity at the peak of the season. Roughly 70% of our operators are older operators, the full life cycle of their business. and are looking to sell in the next few years. Succession planning for them is a big challenge when, the financial options for people who want to enter are the younger entrepreneur and are challenged to access that. And for those of the business that were sold in 2020 and bought, they're faced with new challenges of no previous employees and no previous revenue, which puts a barrier up for them for accessing some of the programs that the federal government is offering to assist them in their recovery. I guess I can't stress enough how important access is to us in the province of Newfoundland and Labrador. Since the pandemic, we've lost 19 flights in Atlantic Canada and are really challenged to how we rebuild some of that. Our operators, 50% open last year. Some of them, about 50% of them, probably at 15% of the revenue. The other less than 8%. So we dropped about 95% of our visitation and our revenue last season, and we don't anticipate much growth in 2021 with the complication of vaccination rollout and being delayed. We can't see it. And actually, even the Canadian Tourism Commission sort of alluded to, we'd probably be into September before we've seen movement in that Canadian market. So a lot of challenges for small business here in our region, and a lot of thank yous to the federal government for their assistance in getting us this far. We really see the opportunity is in the wage subsidy, in bringing employees back on, showing them how to do it right, how to respond to the new expectation from visitors, to feel safe. And we see that as a better option than extending unemployment and, stay-at-home pay. So thank you so much for your time. I'm sorry that the PowerPoint didn't work, but hopefully, I set the stage for where we're at in Grossmore and small business.
You explained it well, Ms. Kennedy. Thank you for that. Before I go to our last witness, the first round of questions will be Mr. Fast, Mr. Fragaskatis, Mr. St. Marie, and Mr. Julian. And the next witness, Mr. Polis, was special advisor with Osler, Hoskin, and Harcourt LLP, is not new to this committee, a former governor of the Bank of Canada. So in a new position, Stephen, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Chair. Good afternoon to you and to the committee. Thanks for asking me to participate in this study of Bill C-30. I just offer 3 points by way of introduction. The first point concerns the context in which we find ourselves. The impact of COVID-19 on people and our economy has been massive. There will be some permanent damage. However, the damage has been mostly limited to sectors that have been shut down. In a typical recession, bad news in one sector usually infects the other sectors through lower confidence. And this has not happened this time. I think this is the main reason why the economy has significantly outperformed most forecasts during the past year. This economic strength has generated a debate around the appropriateness of fiscal stimulus. It has given the government far more fiscal room to maneuver than previously expected. However, any major economic trauma will scar the economy, and these scars will run deeper the longer it takes for the economy to heal. So scarring manifests itself as a level of national income that would be lower than it otherwise could be, literally forever. So I therefore subscribe to the view that it makes sense to push the economy harder during the early stages of recovery, because this will encourage business investment and create new economic growth. My second point concerns fiscal sustainability. A credible fiscal plan in which the level of government debt relative to national income stops rising and debt service costs are manageable, meets the minimum, or we should say perhaps technical, standard of sustainability. I draw your attention to the table on page 328 of the budget, which shows that these criteria are met. By the way, comparing this table to a similar one from the 2019 budget 2 years ago, demonstrates that this budget does not represent a sharp turn toward big government, as many have said. The planned budgetary expenditure trend line returns to about 15% of national income, just as it was pre-COVID. And the budgetary revenue trend line does exactly the same. Now, there's a legitimate concern that this minimum standard of fiscal sustainability would leave the economy vulnerable to future shocks. Well, that issue is for a broader political debate, a debate that I think should acknowledge the challenging fiscal situation in our provinces. When we combine federal and provincial debt together, as we should when considering Canada's future resilience, our fiscal picture is not very different from that in other major economies. My third point is that there are many ways to build future resilience without government austerity or higher taxes. If we put our minds to it, we can grow out from under our COVID debt burden, just like we grew out from under our World War II debt when I was young. Now, there are many ways in which we could boost our long-term economic growth rate and grow our way out of our indebtedness. First of all, immigration is Canada's most important economic growth engine, just as it was in the 1950s and 1960s. So anything we can do to make that process more efficient will be a good investment in future growth. Second, a national childcare program, as announced, can also help boost labor force growth. So I do hope that it can be deployed without delay. This is the sort of program that can literally pay for itself. If we can boost the level of national income by a mere 2% in this way, which amounts to $40 to $50 billion more national income every year, then $6 to $8 billion will automatically land in government coffers, also every year. And third, as I've argued before in this committee, one of our biggest untapped sources of future economic growth is to harmonize provincial regulations across the country to reduce interprovincial business frictions. This initiative has about twice as much economic growth potential as the childcare proposal, and in fact would cost nothing to implement. It seems to me finding innovative ways to boost economic growth and avoid raising taxes should be at the top of our list at this most precarious time, at both the federal and provincial levels. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pellis. Thank you to all our witnesses. Then in the first round, 6 minutes, Mr. Fast, followed by Mr. Vagascatis. Ed?
Chair, I will be substituting in for Mr. Fast in this first round, if that's
okay.
all right.
You're on first again, Mr. Cumming. Go ahead. You're away.
I know how much you've missed me. So, Mr. Pellis, I'll direct my questions towards you, and it's good to see you on committee again. And thank you for your presentation. Quantitative easing and the amount of stimulus that we've seen into the economy, I know when you had appeared previously that you had forecasted that inflation was in check and that it didn't appear to be an issue, but we're seeing some trends now that are quite concerning about inflation. Particularly, industry has suggested that because of supply chain issues, shipping issues, and we've seen it in very much in several sectors that we're starting to see that spike up. Is this not a concern both on two fronts, affordability in a variety of different sectors and competitiveness, and two, on the potential of interest rates now starting to rise to offset that inflation? And you're muted, I think, sir.
Muted, Stephen.
You're right. Sorry about that. You'd think by now I would have found that mute button. Here we go. Well, of course, inflation risk is something we can never take lightly. However, I would just add a couple of things to your premise there. One is that most of the anecdotal or evidence we have around higher prices is coming from commodity markets. Commodity prices, in fact, have been quite depressed for the last while. In fact, if we look at the CRB index of global commodity prices, they're just now returning to levels that they were at back in 2014. If you look at the Bank of Canada website, you'll see the commodity price index, and there too, all the basket of commodities relevant to Canada, prices have been low and now are returning. So this is not inflation. This is normalization of prices. Now, I know there are some exceptions, prices that have gone up a lot, such as lumber, I think is a good example. There's also still the laws of demand and supply still work. Last year, there were plenty of cutbacks in production because the consensus among a lot of economists was that the economy would be very slow for a very long time. And as I mentioned in my introductory remarks, the economy has bounced back, far exceeding all of those expectations, because economists have modeled it in the traditional way that recessions normally work. This one isn't like that at all. And so I think some sectors are still catching up to the recovery in demand. And inflation almost never comes from commodity prices, because commodities can always, you can find more product. You can expand capacity in time. So usually when prices go up enough, somebody brings more capacity online, and that causes that price to settle back down again. And so, I agree with what I've heard from various central banks, that including our own, that the inflation that we're observing right now is very likely to be transitory.
Would you agree, though, that it's not just those commodities? We're seeing a significant spike in real estate, and certainly an inflationary run on the value of real estate in the country.
Well, the price of houses is a special item. It's as you know well, it's not just something we buy. It's an asset. It gives you a stream of housing services for literally forever. And so as a consequence, when interest rates are low, the price of all assets tend to rise, including the price of houses. It's also the laws of supply and demand have not been ruled out. We still have excess demand for new housing relative to the supply that's being created. I note the latest numbers show that housing starts are picking up strongly. And so they're just like with commodities. Supply can come on the market and meet that. I'm not going to pretend that the price of houses has not gone up, but that isn't, strictly speaking, in and of itself, inflation as we describe it. It would need to be something that is sustained for a long period of time for it to be part of inflation. And of course, it is captured in various ways in StatsCan's consumer price index.
So, Mr. Pulitz, you had suggested in one of your points that economic growth is an opportunity to dig ourselves out of this hole. And I actually completely agree with that. But should not, two things. One is we've seen a decline in competitiveness for Canadian companies due to tax structure and probably in addition to some of these commodity prices. But also, should the focus not be, if there's going to be any kind of stimulus spending, on assets that will help produce revenue or improve competitiveness or improve innovation? Because certainly we have to be, according to your remarks, I think export focused rather than selling to ourselves, looking at the broader markets. Would you agree that any kind of stimulus should be focused towards assets that improve competitiveness?
Well, competitiveness is a complicated thing to measure. Anything that contributes to the costs of a company is affecting their competitiveness. Often economists point to the exchange rate as a key part of that. But of course, all forms of taxation or the costs of obtaining permits or lags in obtaining permits, the cost of electricity, which, as you may know, is much higher, for example, in Ontario than it is in Michigan, right next door. Those things are all the things that go in to affect competitiveness. Now, how can policymakers contribute? Well, competitiveness is usually driven by productivity. So anything that encourages new investment in digitalization or opportunities for automation, Yes, the tax structure matters. Infrastructure matters a great deal to Canada's competitiveness. And so there are things going on a wide range of fronts which should help us improve our competitiveness. Possibly the most urgent would be around the ability to digitalize. And so broadband internet, and as well as the skill sets to go with that. But I'm sorry I'm giving you a vague answer, but that's because the question is such a wide-ranging one. I certainly agree that government should be using its tools in every way it can to facilitate companies' ability to improve their competitiveness. That's not necessarily the same as using stimulus dollars to buy things or make certain things happen. But infrastructure, as if I can use the term broadly enough, is for sure a facilitator of competitiveness.
Okay, we will. We went substantially over there, but I think we need a full-scale answer. Turning to Mr. Fragiskatis, followed by Mr. St. Marie. Peter?
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Poloz, I'll continue with you as a matter of fact. I want to ask you about your specific impressions on Budget 2021. You were quoted in media recently, and this is what you said. The minimum ingredients that one needs to have in a sustainable plan are present, and that was done without a meaningful increase in taxes of any kind. Could you expand on that?
Sure. As I said in my opening remarks, if we just look at page 328 of the budget, you can see clearly there that that the forecast debt to national income ratio stops rising next year and is projected to decline very gradually from there. As I said in my opening remarks, that meets what I call the minimum or a technical definition of sustainability, which is that debt is not continuing to rise. Debt is actually slowing relative to your ability to service it. Debt service, public debt charges remain not much above 1% of national income, which for reference is around 1/5 of what they were in the mid 1990s, for example, when we hit a bit of a fiscal wall. So that's a positive way to put it. If you believe that it leaves us unequipped to deal with the next big shock that comes to the economy, that's a judgment, and I won't make that judgment today. But if you believe that, then you would probably argue for a faster decline in indebtedness over time. That's something for sort of the political process to work out, but it's not necessary to what I call the minimum requirements of sustainability.
Thank you very much for that. A lot of interesting things there, of course, in your testimony as well, but I have limited time. And again, I'd like to explore some things that you've said specifically about the budget, in particular in response to criticisms of it that suggest that this is leading to a massive expansion of the state. What you said in response to that criticism is that what I take a little bit of exception to is it's being cast, the budget that is, as this path-breaking move to big government. There is a conservatism around those numbers. What do you mean by that?
Well, as I indicated in my opening statement, again, the same table, page 328 of the budget, shows that once we get past the activities around COVID, next year and in subsequent years, budgetary revenues settle down at about 15% of national income, which is the total tax take of the federal government and other fees. That's exactly what it was before COVID, and it's exactly how it was laid out in the 2019 budget. And if I look at program expenses, they too settle down to 15% of national income, and they were around 15% of national income before COVID and in the 2019 budget. Therefore, the government is not taking more of the economy or spending more as a share of the economy than they were before.
Thank you. And finally, I'd like to ask, you've commented on economic growth and drawn a line to structural changes that can be put into place by way of programs that will add to economic growth. And here you've called for or you voiced support for the government's vision on a national early learning and childcare program. You know, other countries have pursued this. Quebec has pursued it with great benefit for its economic growth in general terms. Can you speak more about how, in your view, a program like this would add to economic growth for Canada?
So it would add to economic growth in the same way that it added to Quebec's economic growth during a similar program, which is now about over 20 years old. So what it does is it allows for an uptick in female, in particular female labor force participation. Labor force growth is the most important ingredient of economic growth. Put it in as simple as possible terms, the growth in the economy will be equal to labor force growth plus whatever productivity growth we're able to generate. We may be able to get, let's say, with the Canadian labor force is no longer generating growth. All of our growth pretty well is now coming from immigration. So if we have immigration of around 1% per year, we can generate 1% economic growth every year. On top of which we get maybe half a point or even as much as 1 percentage point from productivity improvements. So what we can do is add to that equation some decimal points by getting more women to participate in the workforce through a more fulsome childcare early learning program. It worked in Quebec, and it's one of the reasons why Quebec's finances are in better condition going into the COVID than other provinces. So, you know, I just said, as I said in my remarks, I see no reason why it couldn't add as much as 2% onto the level of national income. That's $40 to $50 billion per year of additional national income. And it's also, of course, additional tax revenues that come with that.
The point that's been raised by some, and we heard it in one of our sessions.
Sorry, Peter, we're over.
Oh,
I was on mute when I tried to cut you off.
I promise I didn't try and pull a trick there, Mr. Chair. I promise.
Well, I think Gabriel and Peter Julian are competing in colorful rooms here today. Go ahead, Gabriel. You're on for 6 minutes, and followed by Mr. Julian.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for your presentations. This is very interesting. My questions will be for Mr. Paulos. Hello, once again, it's a great pleasure to see you at the committee and to hear you. You always have very interesting and clear presentations. I'd like to start with a question with respect to what you have just said. The importance of integration to support economic growth. And when you say there's 1% of immigration that can bring 1% of growth in the economy, does that hold when you measure the GDP per capita? And what explains the fact that there's limitations to the productivity for businesses, and that being one of the limiting factor, and the shortage of labor also being a factor? Is there anything else that would be an effect? I'd like to hear what you have to say. Thank you. Thank you very much.
What I was making a very let's say a rough statement. So let me dig into it a little bit more. That is, labor force growth will grow roughly the same rate as immigration because Canada's aging workforce is no longer generating growth itself. It's going to stop generating growth in the next 2 or 3 years. So all of our labor force growth, therefore, net will come only from immigration, unless, of course, we're able to boost participation from underrepresented sectors, such as women, such as Indigenous Canadians, et cetera. Okay, so these are important considerations around the edges. So that 1% growth, that's roughly the immigration target. It's actually a little bit higher than 1% growth that the government has targeted. So we can assume around 1% economic growth from that. Doing it that way suggests there's no increase in per capita growth. That's implicitly what I'm saying. That is not what I'm saying that would occur. I'm saying that's just a simplifying assumption. that in fact we would expect it would add to productivity for two reasons. One is something you alluded to, which is there are in many sectors shortages of workers, and therefore that impedes the productivity of firms that can't find the workers. So these would be in various skill sets. And secondly, because on average, the immigration populations are more entrepreneurial than the average domestic population. That is, they start more businesses, small businesses, and those new businesses add to productivity at the margin. These are not large effects that I'm talking about, but that's what you need in order to boost per capita income, is some extra effects like that.
Merci, c'est très intéressant.
Thank you very much. That's very interesting. And according to you, this question of shortage of labor, is that something that is is it structural, or is it just for this period only? Or is it something that will continue because of the aging of the population that will continue for years to come? Thank you.
It's fairly structural. It's not just a short-term cyclical thing. So what we have is very important structural changes in the economy that are giving rise to persistent excess demand in trades, construction trades. We know we're going to be building infrastructure, heavily for the next 30 years. Lots of green infrastructure for sure. Lots of transit infrastructure, which is aging. So we know there's going to be lots of demand for construction trades. The housing sector continues to grow, of course, and immigration will fuel that. And so I think that is a structural shortfall. And I think we're going to see increasing demand with the aging workforce in the healthcare sector. So there's going to be shortfalls there, not just doctors, but through the whole chain. And so those are just some examples. So I definitely think it's not a cyclical thing. It's a structural thing.
Okay. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. How much time do I have left? 2 minutes? Well, great. Mr. Poulos. This is maybe early to do the exercise, but what would be the conclusions of this pandemic? We haven't come out of it, but if we were to look behind us and to look over the last 14 months, if for the Bank of Canada as well as for the government, if there were policies or different ways of operating, what would they have been? What should they have been?
You're asking about lessons learned, I guess. I mean.
Oui, tout à fait.
Okay, je m'excuse.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
Well, I do think it's early to be to be drawing real lessons, but I guess from my own point of view, I would say that speed mattered, and so you see some countries that were slower to react just because fiscal policy requires a bunch of negotiations or something passed in their parliament or in Congress. I think that one of the things that we did well was we made tools that I called them elastic, because they get bigger if the economy is more challenged, or they get smaller when the economy does better. That's a form of automatic policy. And so I think the lessons that everyone around the world has learned is that the more automatic tools there are, the better things work in this situation. We also learned that fiscal policy is the most important tool when interest rates are so low. Not only that it's the only one that really can work, but it's a very powerful tool. That's something we knew since Keynes in the 1930s, franchement, but it's still, I'm glad that it worked the way it said it would. That's a limited answer for now. I think we should give it more time.
Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much.
Two economists on a row. And welcome, Colleen Kennedy, on the screen now. We see you. We'll turn to Mr. Julian for 6 minutes, and then a split between Mr. Falk and Ms. Jansen, I believe. Mr. Julian, there you are.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thanks to all of our witnesses for coming forward today. Very important testimony. And we hope that you and your families continue to be safe and healthy through this pandemic as the third wave crashes on our shores. I'd like to start with you, Mr. McDonald. Thank you so much for your testimony today. You've pointed out that there are a number of things that should happen in terms of overall revenue. You're not concerned about the deficit, but we all need to be concerned about the profoundly unequal tax system that we have. Government is refusing to put into place a wealth tax, though it worked in the Second World War, refusing to put in place a pandemic's profits tax, even though we know that that is something that's an effective measure other countries are taking, and is refusing to take any meaningful action against the overseas tax havens that the PBO tells us costs over $25 billion a year. How important is it to have a fair tax system to actually put in place those measures so we have the wherewithal, we have the resources to help so many people that are struggling now through the pandemic and in the rebuilding after?
Well, thanks, Mr. Julian, for the question. Certainly, the tax system can play the role of equalizing creating a more equal society in an after-tax sense, which is to say taking that money and redistributing it, but also restricting the maximum gains you get at the top end. In terms of raising the revenue, of course, what this does is provides extra fiscal room for additional programs. So, for instance, if we wanted to further expand a childcare program, provide, for instance, much better standards on long-term care, in terms of new transfers to the provinces, this is the sort of thing that would give the federal government more flexibility in doing so. The present federal government take of the Canadian economy in terms of revenue to GDP is relatively low. I mean, it has been much higher in the past. And so it's not as if we're at sometime, we're nowhere near all-time highs in terms of the revenue take, either on the revenue side or on the expenditure side of the federal government. And so the points that you mentioned in terms of a wealth tax, an excess profits tax, are additional things that I think are worth examining in the context of COVID-19, in addition to other measures like some way in the short term to clamp down on profit shifting as we sort of wait for the BEPS committees at the OECD to work through international proposals on how we do that in a more coordinated way.
Thank you very much. Now, I'd like to come back to one of the big missing pieces of this budget. We had a vote in February on the Canada Pharmacare Act, and the government members voted against that legislative framework modeled on the Canada Health Act for pharmacare. Pharmacare, of course, has basically been tossed aside, even though it was something the government committed to in the 2019 election. How important is it to have in place pharmacare, both the economic costs of not having pharmacare, public universal pharmacare in place, but also the social costs of having 10 million Canadians that have no drug or medication plan to pay for often life-saving medication?
Well, certainly in the context of the pandemic, many Canadians are receiving drug insurance through their employer. And so with the big disruption in employment over the course of the pandemic, in particular sectors, often for women more so than men, you're not only are you seeing a certain sector of the population that is just that is just not covered for drug insurance, but then you've got another section of the population where that drug coverage may well have been interrupted during the pandemic. And so I think when we look at this as an economy-wide problem, there can be substantial savings from a national pharmacare plan. One of the challenges is, of course, that the savings don't necessarily all go to the same place. So the provinces might see savings because they would see reduced healthcare costs, whereas it might be the federal government that pays for it. And so I think sorting out the jurisdictional issues has unfortunately really retarded the development of a national pharmacare plan that in an aggregate sense would likely lead to savings, except that those savings go to different places from who pays for it. And certainly in the context of a national pandemic, it just highlights the need for coordinated action on healthcare issues generally, on public health, but certainly on things also like drug coverage.
Thank you very much. Now, you also referenced the climate emergency, and we have a bombshell, there's no other way to put it, International Energy Agency report this morning that says that if we are to stave off a profoundly damaging climate emergency, we have to say no to new oil and gas projects. And this government has invested heavily in oil and gas subsidies, as we know. We have the government as well, so far, pumping $18.5 billion into the Trans Mountain project, vociferously opposed by First Nations, by British Columbia, by cities involved. So to what effect should the government be switching from these massive subsidies to the oil and gas sector and building Trans Mountain to actually investing in clean energy infrastructure, clean energy development, and the hundreds of thousands of jobs that come with that?
I mean, this is really an ideal time when we look at the cost to take out new debt to pay for the things that we need to move away from reliance on fossil fuels, not only to sort of get around in terms of transportation, but also in terms of key industries in particular provinces. This is the time to start to develop just transition strategies that takes workers who did work in oil and gas, made good money working in oil and gas, flew in to work in oil and gas, can find someplace else where they can also make good money. It's not reasonable to simply abandon workers on this path to net zero. Now, that's not going to happen tomorrow. It's not going to happen by 2025. It's going to happen by 2040 or 2050. But now is the time to start, particularly at a time when we can make critical investments in those areas. It's not a time to put this off out of some fear of high interest costs when we have such low interest costs on new debt that we might incur to that end.
Okay, we will have to end that round there, and we'll go to, I believe, you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Falk and Ms. Jensen splitting time? No, who's on?
Mr. Easter, I'll be taking this round. Thanks.
Okay, you guys are switching all over the place today.
We are.
Mr. Fast for 5 minutes, followed by Ms. Zerowitz.
Yeah, that's what we call elasticity, Mr. Chair.
Okay, good.
Mr. Polo, Stephen, nice to have you back at committee and nice to see you again. I wanted to address your opening comments. You referred to the inflationary impacts of stimulus and you tended to downplay them. I think the term you used was that they're transitory. Now, if they're not transitory and they're more pervasive and persistent, would you agree with me that that would represent a significant challenge to the sustainability premise of the budget?
Well, it's a highly hypothetical question, isn't it? I mean, to me, the sorts of policies that have been put in place around the world post-COVID all look to people as if they would be inflationary. But what they're doing is counteracting an enormous deflationary force to keep us roughly where we should be. When things normalize, one would need to transition to a more normalized set of policies across the wide front. And that, of course, is a matter of judgment when that actually takes place. And given that central banks, for virtually everyone that I know about, is pursuing inflation targets, then you'd expect them to continue to pursue those inflation targets. So to me, it's almost too hypothetical. If you're asking the question, what happens to government debt when inflation goes up? Well, indebtedness goes down because the economy, as it's measured in terms of national income, today, let's say it goes up, if things settle to normal and we're growing at, say, 2% per year real and 2% inflation, that would be 4% nominal growth.
That was not my question. My question was actually the premise upon which the budget was built was that, in fact, the stimulus measures that were being introduced, the stimulus that's sitting on the sidelines and savings accounts on the corporate and household side, the stimulus, massive stimulus on the American side, that it's all transitory, will not have significant, pervasive, sustained impacts on inflation. Therefore, don't worry about interest rates. They're going to stay around where they are right now. If those assumptions are wrong, if you're wrong about the inflationary impacts of this stimulus, that changes a lot, doesn't it? I mean, that's my question.
Well, if that premise is wrong, then the economy will show signs of being much stronger sooner than expected, and those very same elastic policies that we talked about will immediately retreat and reduce the amount of stimulus that is being delivered. That's the beauty of the automatic formulation that's being used. So if you're talking super hypothetical, is it possible to overstimulate? It is, but I argued in my remarks that going gradual as occurred during the 2008 to 2010 period left long legacy of permanent scars on the economy. And I think that suggests that a more rapid return to normalcy here will reduce the amount of scarring and therefore reduce the permanent effects.
I hope you're right. I really
hope so too.
Right. Listen, I want to touch on one other thing. That is, you mentioned that the increase in housing prices isn't necessarily inflation. That housing price inflation would have to be sustained for it to be considered inflation. Listen, out my way, out on the West Coast, we've had sustained housing inflation for a long time. And if your statement were out there, just hanging out there, I know it's going to attract a lot of attention. So do you want to clarify that?
So what I want to clarify is that StatsCan captures the cost of living in a home in your consumer price index. Of course it does. And importantly, that includes not just the price of a house, but also the cost of servicing the mortgage that goes with it. And if you look at charts that show debt service in the household sector, you see that basically the household sector has maintained a pretty constant level of debt service because the rise in house prices has been offset by falling interest rates, roughly speaking. Not everywhere, but for the aggregate economy. And so for that reason, we don't see a lot of evidence of rising skyrocketing house prices showing up as part of consumer prices. I know that individual markets, prices have gone up tremendously. And as I've said previously, that is on a side effect that is pretty hard to avoid when you're stimulating the economy like this, and it's the main area that's growing. And so that the best antidote to that is to increase the supply of houses. That's to me the most important thing. Houses are in short supply.
Of course, that's easier said than done.
We are
agreed.
Quite a bit over, so we'll have to move on to Ms. Sirowitz, followed by Mr. St. Marie.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank all three panelists for their excellent presentations. My first questions are to Mr. Poulos. Mr. Poulos, welcome back. Nice to see you. I was very happy to hear about your comments around the need to harmonize to reduce interprovincial trade barriers. I have valiantly tried to convince the opposition members of this committee for a need for an urgent study for us to move forward on eliminating interprovincial trade barriers. I have been unsuccessful to date. You had mentioned that it would cost nothing and it could actually boost our economic growth by as much as childcare, so up to around 2%. As you have indicated, Budget 2021 does have some money to start tackling the interprovincial trade barriers. Can you maybe talk a little bit more about the importance of this and maybe some of our initial steps, or what some of the next steps should be?
Yes, well, first in my remarks, I indicated that there's twice as much potential economic growth in harmonizing trade barriers across provinces than there is in the Child Care Initiative. The best empirical work conducted by a professor from the University of Calgary, along with people at the IMF, suggests that for the country as a whole, we can boost national income by about 4% by erasing these inconsistent regulations across provinces. That to me is free money, because it just means sitting down and saying, well, okay, there are 8 different specifications or regulatory specifications for furnaces for homes across this country. Imagine if you're the manufacturer of furnaces and you need to manufacture to 8 different standards. What is the purpose of that? It's an accidental outcome. It's that provinces do their own regulation, and over time you get these divergences. All we need to do is have a weekend where everybody rolls up their sleeves and is committed to doing this. Because if we did this, then you could also leave the room and say, we think we can do this without raising taxes. Wouldn't that be a good news item? So to me, the motivation has never been higher than it is today to get down and get serious about this. But of course, there are some things in there that people will defend very vigorously. You know, maybe it really is really important that the creamers that you get in the coffee shop in Montreal must be a different size than the ones you get in a coffee shop in Toronto. Maybe that's really important to someone, but I'm afraid I don't understand it.
Thank you so much, Mr. Paulos. My next question to you is, thank you for mentioning the immigration investments that we have in Budget 2021. They indeed will also help boost the economy as well as grow jobs. My question to you is, there's also a significant amount of investment around skills and training. Can you also comment on how this will help boost economic growth and help with job creation?
Well, skills and training investment ensures that we get the matches that we need. You know, we mentioned before some shortages. It's easy to identify shortages in the workforce. And I think this is going to become a larger problem as we go through and exit from the pandemic. Probably you've heard me talk about the K-shaped economy. The top part of the K, everything's performing quite well. And it's, you know, perhaps 97% of the economy. But then the bottom 3% that is struggling is going to continue to struggle. And what we need to do is find the ways for those folks to find their way into the top part of the K, just as we did after oil prices collapsed. You know, back in 2014-15, there was a K-shaped economy then. And so skills training helps folks find their way into the top part of the K to improve the matching and improves the efficiency and therefore the productivity of the economy. We can't do all this through immigration. We need to do that with the folks that are, you know, dislocated by the shocks that hit our economy. Programs exist and the programs work, but I think those investments will pay off even more in future because basically the technological revolution is being accelerated by COVID. And so the displacement of workers, I think, will accelerate. We will need to invest more resources in that transition.
Thank you. And then my last question to you is, it's about the economic scarring you were talking to a little bit earlier. We've heard on many occasions that our finance minister has been committed to sustain stimulus spending in order to ensure a lasting and strong economic recovery. We learned from 2008 that we don't want to be pulling out too quickly. How do you think we can avoid the mistake of pulling stimulus too early and have a sustained recovery? And do you think we have the timing about right in our budget right now? So I think we have sort of the emergency benefits staying in place till about late in the year.
Well, that last part is hard to say. Of course, it depends on the vaccinations and the success of the vaccinations and whether there's wave 4 and those kinds of things. So I really have no way of forecasting that. And I think, though, that, again, I emphasize the elasticity of the programs that were set up so that provided that there's a willingness to maintain them a little bit longer if necessary, we know they'll automatically shorten themselves if we succeed with rapid vaccinations and things get back to normal. So we can do that with confidence, knowing that it's not like we're just spending money. We're actually making something available. People only tap into it when they don't have a job. And so I think there's that was a good model. It should serve us well as the thing unfolds. The timing, therefore, is something else. It's beyond any of our control, but the system is designed to accommodate different timing. So I think that's appropriate. In terms of the stimulus afterwards, you know, as I said in the beginning, it's a judgment call, really, and I'm not in a position to judge that overall. If for some reason, as Mr. Fast is asking, if it turns out to be a little too much, well, the signs will be there, and then it'll be possible to adjust policies in different ways in an endogenous fashion.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you both. Before I turn to Mr. St. Marie, I just want to throw in a question to Ms. Kennedy. I know you're in the Gross Morin area, Ms. Kennedy. You did mention, and we had people on the previous panel on the emergency wage subsidy. How important is it to your industry in your area that changes be made to the wage subsidy from what is in Bill C-30? And secondly, I know you're in a national park. And what difference does the national park in Grossmoor make to your region? You're muted, Colleen.
Thanks very much. The wage subsidy is actually going to be just as important this year as it was last year. So in 2020, we lost, like I said, about 95% of our visitor. And this year, anything that's outside of Newfoundland is going to be a challenge. We are looking forward to the bubble. We're not sure. So we're only probably anticipating probably 15% at the max again this year until September and the vaccine rolls out. So a lot of these businesses who didn't open last year or are opening this year are going to be very challenged to bring back on their employees. So without that wage subsidy, they can't even figure out how to open their doors to the visitors and what the behavior or the change in behavior at the workplace is going to be. So actually they need the investment more this year than they ever did to continue on and to welcoming, hopefully, season 2022, which is looking way better. We're in a national park and we're very blessed because on the north of the park, basically the communities are depending on the fishery and they're very challenged in doing that and sustaining their communities. So last year, you guys, the federal government made big investment in internet expansion to these communities, which were huge. It was important because that became so important this year to communicate and stay in the tourism game with, the different trade partners that they're using, the different tour companies that they're using. So I know a lot of businesses have lost out this year, mostly cancellations for this season, but 22 is not looking too bad. But if they don't have the resources to get them to 2022, all is lost. So the 2-year fight will be lost for them. Like I said, we're very fortunate to be in a national park. We're fairly new in the tourism business. We've been in it for about 40 years. So we're just getting to our next family of businesses that's developing and experiences in this region. And we have a lot of opportunity. We have a lot of federal presence here with regards to new highways, new experiences, and a lot to show the rest of Canada what we have. So we're hoping that, Canadians will look to come and know more about other special spots in Canada. But I do think that the government can't underestimate the value in the next year in keeping people in that industry, and they can't do it without your assistance.
Là, c'est vous qui êtes en
Thank you very much, Mr. St. Marie.
Oui, merci. Je commencerai.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to start with a comment. I'd just like to remind the guests that from my point of view, all of the MPs do agree that we should increase interprovincial trade. It's not because we didn't support it, and we're not against it, not at all. There's been a study done from my point of view. This is something that's very important, and these are negotiations that need to happen between provinces. Canada is a federation, and we see that there's more and more strength to everything. We're seeing everything being decided in Ottawa. Well, I think that we do have different levels of government, and not everything needs to come from Ottawa. And on that, there's something in C30 is the financing for the real estate values, and this is something that will hurt the Quebec economy, and it's something we can't support. So now my question, this will be for Mr. Paulos. When we look at the extent of the crisis and the responses of government and central banks that have been done across the world, it's really scary. This is without precedence, and it would seem that it's working well. But given that these are very high amounts, I think that there is a risk of inflation. Mr. Paulos was saying maybe, as he said in another life, there could be deflation. So I think that there may be bubbles in certain markets, in the real estate market, for example. So when we look at all of the risks, we need to look at what could happen since we've lost our regular landmarks. So, Mr. Poulos, according to you, what are the risks that we should be looking at, or which sectors could there be risks where we could see a prolonging of the recession? We could talk about the exchange rate. We could talk about bubbles in certain sectors. So you spoke about a recovery. And do you think that will some sectors have a harder time with their recovery? And will that mean that we may have a new crisis? And with climate change, should we be looking there towards the risks, or where should we be looking? Should we be looking at preventing a new crisis, a new pandemic, or what should we be doing? Thank you.
Okay. Well, of course, there are many risks. We are, as you indicated, we've never been here before. And so the signposts that we're reading are not as reliable as usual. I can say flippantly that don't worry about inflation. Inflation depends on demand and supply. Always has, but we don't know for sure how much demand has been suppressed by COVID-19, how much of the policies we're putting in place will translate into more demand, and what is the supply side doing? When I talk about scarring, what I'm talking about is permanent losses of companies, permanent losses of jobs, permanent losses of industrial or commercial capacity. And that means that your supply is coming down when demand is rising. That of course would have inflation potential. So the way I portrayed our response, it is that we should be playing those odds, which is what risks do we want to manage? Well, let's have policies that increase investment, either directly, such as in infrastructure, such as in social infrastructure like childcare, but such as in incentives to vastly increase investments in carbon capture, for example, which is investment, but on the green line. Those things are things that add to capacity and are anti-inflationary in their effect. And so they mitigate that risk that there might be an outbreak of inflation. Central banks, of course, are watching this much more carefully than I do, and their job is clear. And so I have complete faith in how that will turn out. A fourth wave, a fifth wave are major risks that we face. Sectors that are struggling, as I said, can translate into exits. But I would just say on this, there have been many company entries, many firms created during this episode. I was quite amazed that we lost more than 100,000 businesses during last summer. But by the time we got to the end of the year, we had gotten back over 80% of the businesses, and they're not the same businesses. They are brand new businesses that are entering the market in the middle of a pandemic. This shows how resilient the Canadian economy is. The last risk I'll mention is I think there's a risk that there will be some form of a crisis in somewhere else in the world, an emerging market crisis. In some countries do not have the institutional capacity or the fiscal capacity that we have, but they're dealing with the same problems that we are.
Okay, we're going to move on.
For instance.
We're going to move on to Mr. Julian, and then we'll be followed by Mr. Kelly and Ms. Petrakis, and we'll have to close there. Mr. Julian, 2 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. A question for Ms. Kennedy. The government is scaling back substantially COVID support starting in a few weeks, and we're in the midst of a dangerous, deadly third wave. Do you think the government is acting prematurely in cutting back all of those supports that people desperately need at a time when we are very much in danger?
Yes, I do actually, because I think the government responded very well to the needs of Canadians when the pandemic started. And yeah, we might have the vaccine and we might be getting closer to out the other end, but we are far from financially independent or wealthy enough to, in some of these cases, for these companies to move on without assistance. And we're still probably months out from, before we reintroduce or we're back to even 50% of our business capacity. And a lot of that's not going to be for about 6 months out. Like I said, it's not just a matter of getting the vaccine for us. We've lost 19 flights in Atlantic Canada. We almost got to rebuild our traffic routes and our access routes to fill our businesses and our accommodators again. So I don't think pulling out in the next 3 or 4 months is a wise idea for us.
Thank you so much. Now, Mr. Poulos, you talked about growing out of World War II debt. Now, of course, in World War II, we actually had strong measures against profiteering. We had a wealth tax. We had 100% excess profits tax at the end of the war, as you well know. And we have a government that has done absolutely nothing about the revenue side. No wealth tax, no pandemic profits tax, no cracking down on overseas tax havens. Do you feel it's important that we actually start to address tax fairness and the fact that we have billionaires and big corporations making money hand over fist, and so many Canadians are struggling at this time and need resources and support?
Well, perhaps the question is offered in a very abstract way, but I can just say that Canada has, if not one of the most fair tax structures across the OECD. Those are summary statistics that are easily available on the OECD website, cross-country analysis. I'm not saying that it's perfect, of course not. Should the government be considering other things? Well, as I indicated in my opening remarks, whether you believe that stopping the rise in government debt and having it gently decline as a share of national income is sufficient to prepare us for another rainy day, that is more of a political consideration than an analytical one. I'm not going to express an explicit view on it. To me, what I said was technically, it is sustainable in the way it's been presented. But I would listen to someone that thought that was not good enough for the next crisis that might come along. And so for that, you would need some other measures, I guess. But I believe that putting those efforts into boosting economic growth is the fastest and the best way to do exactly that, add to our future resilience.
Okay,
so I don't know why we would raise taxes when you have all those other great opportunities to boost economic growth. That's my position.
All right, then we will go and we'll split the time between Mr. Kelly and Ms. Kotrakis, about 4 minutes each. Mr. Kelly.
It's going to be me.
Oh, it's going to be Ms. Jansen. All right, you guys.
We're just switching it up here.
Tamara.
Mr. Poulos, originally you had said that there would be no inflation, and here we are. Unfortunately, your prediction was wrong. So why should we believe you now when you suggest that inflation won't last?
Well, I hope you don't mind if I take exception to your question. But when we went through a shock the size that we did, what we had is a lot of prices fell. I give you, for instance, that I went down to Toronto back in November to do a televised thing, and I stayed at the Sheraton in Toronto for $169, and I had been there only back in the spring, and it was $469. Now, what would we call this? That is deflation, correct?
Well,
now,
I believe that the government is now charging quarantine hotels. It's like $3,000 or something.
I'm not going to comment on that. But when the price of the hotel room goes back up to $269 or whatever it goes up to, you would call it inflation. But I'm saying it's just a return to more normal pricing, and it measures as inflation, and is transitory because when prices go up, unless they go up year after year, it's not inflation. All it is a return of price to normal.
Okay.
And so that's as short as an answer I can give.
Okay. So the biggest source of federal government funds last year came from the central bank, not tax revenue, not lenders, just central bank money printing. So now we have too many dollars chasing too few goods, meaning working people pay more for housing, food, and fuel. Since the Bank of Canada has committed to continue printing more money to the tune of $156 billion to cover the $154 billion deficit the Liberals have announced, it would seem that inflation will continue for at least another year. So not so transitory as you're suggesting. So who's a Canadian to believe in regards to inflation, you or their grocery bill?
So I'm not going to answer questions that are actually questions for the governor of the Bank of Canada. I'm not the governor of the Bank of Canada. But what I will explain is that when prices go down and then they go back up again, that so-called inflation stays in the inflation numbers for a whole year. We call it a base effect. And then it comes back down. And so that is a transitory rise in prices. The prices stay up, but the inflation rate only goes up temporarily and comes back down a year later. That is the sort of phenomenon that you're describing. And I'll leave my comments there because I'm not here to defend the Bank of Canada's current policies. It's not my job. It's not appropriate.
Okay, I am going to have to end it there, and we'll go to Ms. Katrakis. You got about 3 minutes, Annie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just for the record, I wanted to correct my colleague, Ms. Jansen, that the Government of Canada is not setting prices on how much hotels are charging for the quarantine. I think that that's important to put on the record. Mr. Poulos, we heard through your testimony that, a lot of the programs that we've put in place helped save our economy, and we've seen higher than expected growth rates in the second half of 2020. And with the vaccine rollout well underway, we're potentially looking at a faster than originally expected recovery from the pandemic. How do you see our economic recovery progressing over the months and years ahead? And what role does this budget play in putting us on track for strong growth?
Well, I think you're right. We have seen the recovery so far, if I can call it a recovery, the period during which measures of output have gone back towards normal has outpaced all the forecasts that were laid out last year, in fact, all the way up till Christmas. And not just in Canada, it's everywhere. So there's some resilience that I've referred to has been seen in many countries. And I believe, as I said in my opening remarks, it has to do with our normal understanding of how recessions work. We think of them as being widespread across the entire economy instead of in certain pockets. In these cases, those things have been shut down. I feel very badly for those people. It's awful. Their business are at risk, the jobs are at risk, but it's stayed in those sectors. It has not spread across the whole economy. Therefore, the recovery goes a completely different way than normal. Given that, I'm quite optimistic that once the vaccinations spread around and we're back on firm footing, that we're gonna see some of the savings that have been made during the pandemic unleashed. I don't think we're gonna have the roaring 20s. I think people are gonna be fairly conservative, but there's gonna be a savings-led mini boom at least from the consumer. And I think we're gonna see a continuation of growth from there. And I think what has to happen next is the growth leaders have to switch back to investment and exporting, and that's exactly what I would expect to see. So I can't be anything but optimistic over the next couple of years, and I think the right ingredients are present.
Okay, we are going. I'm sorry, Annie, and sorry all. We could have used another hour here, I know, but a committee meets with another panel in a little less than 30 minutes. So I want to, on behalf of the committee, thank all the witnesses. Thank you all for coming and answering our questions. Been a very interesting exchange at times, even a little testy, but that goes with what happens on Finance Committee. So with that, thank you all once again, and wish you well the rest of the day. Meeting adjourned.